When most people think about the Epstein case, they think about the names we already know. The billionaires, the politicians, the royalty, the men and women whose reputations were quietly insulated by power, money, and carefully worded statements. But today, we're not starting with them. We're starting with her, Karina Shuliak, a young woman who, at the time of Jeffrey Epstein's alleged death, was living in his Manhattan mansion, the woman he left the bulk of his estate to in his will, the last known person he spoke to on the phone before he was found allegedly dead in his jail cell. For years, she has existed on the periphery of this story, mentioned briefly, photographed occasionally, labeled simply as Epstein's girlfriend. But when you begin to examine the newly released DOJ files and lay the timeline out carefully, something becomes clear. You cannot understand Epstein's final years without understanding Karina. And you can't understand Karina without following the network around her, because she wasn't just present, she was embedded in his life, his properties, his daily operations, the financial and social structures that kept his world turning from his first conviction until after his final imprisonment. And as we trace her movements, where she lived, who she met, the documents she signed, the flights that she may have been connected to, we begin to see familiar names surface again and again. Prominent public figures, wealthy benefactors, powerful associates whose proximity to Epstein did not end when the headlines briefly faded in 2008. Over the past several years, and especially in the past several months, we've watched a handful of powerful people fall. Some arrested, some removed, some quietly resigning from prestigious positions as public pressure mounted. Careers have collapsed, titles have been stripped, reputations have been permanently stained, and yet, when you look at the broader web surrounding Epstein, it becomes impossible to ignore how many prominent figures have managed to distance themselves without ever fully answering the harder questions. Apologies were issued, statements were crafted, legal teams stepped in, and then for many, life simply moved on. Accountability has been selective. Accountability has been weak and performative in the face of what happened here. Consequences have been uneven. If we are going to talk honestly about what these files reveal, we cannot stop at the names that have already fallen. There are still individuals who operated within this world, who benefited from proximity, who appeared in records and timelines, and who have never had to publicly reconcile their involvement. If transparency means anything, it means following the evidence wherever it leads, even when it leads someplace uncomfortable. So, let's call some people out today. Let's shine a light on how quick they were to ignore Epstein's deeds if they were able to benefit from him in some way, or if Epstein had something equally incriminating that could be brought into the light about them, something that would strip away the polish and professionalism of their carefully crafted reputations and careers. Jeffrey Epstein was a sick and dangerous man, but he did not operate in isolation. The people who worked with him and for him, who knew what he was doing and chose to look the other way, those who took part in what he was doing and benefited from him, too many of them have been allowed to remain safely in the shadow for far too long. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, and thank you for joining me for another true crime deep dive. And this has been obviously very highly requested since 3.5 million pages of the Jeffrey Epstein files were released by the Department of Justice. Everyone has been asking me, are you looking at them? Are you reading them? I did a few videos on Jeffrey Epstein some years back, so of course, I was looking at them, and I've been responding back to people and telling them, yes, I'm looking at these. There's so much to get through, and there is still so much to get through, but I have found enough where I think we can start opening some doors and shining a light on what needs to have a light shined on it. This research has been done over the course of several weeks at this point. I've spent days and nights just absolutely glued to my computer, and at times I've had to take, a few days away because of how overwhelming, overstimulating, and disturbing the information in these files can be sometimes. And not just disturbing based on the actions that were taken, but disturbing based on how deep it goes, how far the web sort of spans out, and how many people who are names that we all know, everyday names that we see in business and politics and Hollywood. How many of those people are caught in this web now? I think eternally. They really don't have any way of distancing themselves from Jeffrey Epstein any longer. And when I talk about Karina Shuliak, I'm using her in a way to build sort of a structure for this video and the ones that will follow about Jeffrey Epstein and what we found out in the files. Because if you look at Karina was somebody who, for a very long time, was talking to Jeffrey Epstein and involved with Jeffrey Epstein almost every single day. And so through their communications, you can kind of see what he was up to, who else he was talking to that day, who else he was thinking about that day, what else he was doing. And I was using that as a timeline to sort of cross-reference. So if Jeffrey Epstein told Karina something, then I would cross-reference that in the files and the emails and sort of figure out what else he was doing. And I found that to be the only way at some point that I could organize this research and kind of know where to start. And I wanted to also talk about Karina because I think she's incredibly important, more important than any of us may know. Okay, who is Karina Shuliak and why is she suddenly back in the news after flying under the radar for so long? Well, in February of 2026, Columbia University punished 2 people affiliated with its dental college after Department of Justice documents revealed that they, along with others, many others, had bypassed the normal process to help Karina gain admission as a favor to Jeffrey Epstein in exchange for large amounts of money and favors, of course. It was also revealed that 2 days before Jeffrey Epstein allegedly died in prison, he created a trust naming several beneficiaries of his extensive wealth and holdings. And you may be asking me, why do I keep saying Jeffrey Epstein allegedly died? Well, I mean, that's been a running joke for a long time now, right? Like, Jeffrey Epstein's not dead. Yes, it has been a running joke. And there have been things that have come to my attention through my research that lead me to believe maybe it was not so much of a joke, right? Maybe he actually never did die and he's still alive. And if you asked me to tell you, do I think, if I had to give you an answer, is Jeffrey Epstein dead or alive? I would say he's alive. At this point, that's where we're at. And we're going to talk about all of that as we go through this process and this adventure together. Now, for years, the public narrative has been pretty simple. Ghislaine Maxwell was the woman in Epstein's life, his partner, his recruiter, his accomplice, the social bridge between him and other powerful men. And when the scandal fully detonated, Maxwell became the face of female complicity in Epstein's world, prosecuted, convicted, sentenced, and permanently cemented in public memory as his co-conspirator. As she should have been, don't get me wrong. But when you look at the end of Epstein's life, the documents tell a more complicated story. Maxwell was left a measly $10 million. Karina Shuliak was left $50 million. But wait, I'm not done, because she was also left his properties, his Manhattan mansion, Little St. James Island, his place in Palm Beach, his place in Paris, Zorro Ranch, and an additional $5 million for each property for operating expenses. Jeffrey Epstein left Karina a diamond ring set weighing just under 33 carats, and he left her all of his loose diamonds because, he's got a ton of loose diamonds. He left her all of these loose diamonds, and then he made it clear that these diamonds had already been given to Karina in contemplation of marriage. And if you know anything about Jeffrey Epstein, he didn't believe in marriage, right? He was more of a playboy. He didn't want to settle down with one woman. But as we'll come to find, Jeffrey Epstein talked about marriage quite a bit. And apparently, he was thinking about making Karina Shuliak Mrs. Jeffrey Epstein. And the evening before the world heard that Jeffrey Epstein had taken his own life in prison, allegedly, he spent 20 minutes on a phone call with Karina, an unrecorded phone call of all things. And allegedly, Karina's the last person that Jeffrey Epstein would ever talk to before he allegedly passed away. Now, publicly, Ghislaine Maxwell occupied the spotlight, photographed on yachts, photographed with Jeffrey Epstein on his private plane. She was seen networking in elite social circles. She was visible, loud, social, a gatekeeper. Karina, by contrast, appears almost spectral, behind the scenes, instrumental to the structure of Epstein's operations, benefiting enormously, yet rarely scrutinized. Now, this isn't about replacing one villain with another, because Ghislaine Maxwell's been talked about, ad nauseum. We know everything that there is to know about her, essentially, but it's about acknowledging that power structures don't disappear just because the most visible player has been convicted and then allegedly passed away. Sometimes the most consequential roles are not the loudest ones, and sometimes the person standing quietly at the center of the end game deserves just as much scrutiny as the one history has already judged. So we have a lot to talk about today, some of it ridiculous, some of it uncomfortable, some of it downright depraved. But before we dive into that world, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark VPN. Before we get back into the video, I want to take a quick moment to talk about today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. If you've been following everything happening with the Epstein documents lately, you've probably noticed something interesting. Thousands of emails, messages, and communications are suddenly being examined line by line on the internet. And while those particular emails were part of a federal investigation, it does make you think about how much of our own digital information exists out there. Every time you connect to the internet, especially on public Wi-Fi, your data can potentially be exposed. Passwords, personal messages, browsing activity, all of it can be visible to the wrong people if you're not protecting it. That's where a VPN like Surfshark comes in. Surfshark encrypts your internet connection, which basically scrambles your data so it can't be read by hackers, trackers, or anyone trying to snoop. Think of it like sending your internet traffic through a secure tunnel instead of broadcasting it out into the open. One thing I really love about Surfshark is that one subscription works on unlimited devices, which is great. If you're like me and you have a laptop, phone, tablet, maybe even a smart TV all connected at once. Plus, if you've got family members like your kids or your parents and you want their computers, their phones, their gaming systems to be protected, one subscription with Surfshark is going to cover all of that. And Surfshark also comes with some really useful tools. For example, there's an email scam checker where you can check if a message in your inbox might be a phishing attempt, which is honestly helpful because that's a big thing lately, and the internet is full of weird emails from people you definitely did not ask to hear from. There's also Clean Web, which automatically blocks malicious websites, ads, and trackers. And if you have kids using devices in the house, there's even a web content blocker that works as parental controls, which has been super helpful and great for me. Another thing people really like about Surfshark is the entertainment side of it, because Surfshark has servers in over 100 countries. You can connect through different locations and sometimes access shows, movies, or streaming libraries that aren't available in your region. I use this all the time. So if you've ever tried to watch something and gotten that this content is not available in your area message, Surfshark can help with that. And if you're like me and you're not incredibly tech savvy, it's very easy to use. There's 24/7 customer support, and they also offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it out risk-free. So I love Surfshark VPN. I've been using it forever. There's so many different ways that you can use it. And if you want to check it out for yourself, go to surfshark.com/stephanieharlowe and use code stephanieharlowe at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Once again, that's surfshark.com/stephanieharlowe and use code stephanieharlowe for 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Thank you so much to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back to it. Karina Shuliak traveled to the United States from her home country of Belarus in 2009 when she was around 19 or 20. Now, the internet gives her birth year as 1990, but in the Epstein files, we see that she was actually born on June 8th, 1989, at least according to her. Now, as a reference point, Jeffrey Epstein was born on January 20th, 1953, which makes him a whole ass 36 years older than Karina. Just as a reference point, so we can start the disgust early. Now, Karina first pops up in the files in the summer of 2009 when she's emailing with someone named Jeremy Stifler. And from these emails, we can determine that in August, she was working as a dental assistant at a Russian dental office in Brooklyn while living in New York City. Now, it looks like she cleaned Jeremy's teeth once while she was working for someone named Dr. Malik, and from there, a budding romance began. Jeremy and Karina made a date to go to the Museum of Natural History. Karina also tells Jeremy that she has to find a new job because she needs to go home to Belarus. She says she doesn't want to go back, but she hopes to be able to return to the U.S. the following year. According to these emails, Karina left New York to return to Belarus on September 3rd, 2009, but despite the distance, she and Jeremy attempted to keep their communication and their connection going. He asked her what her favorite food at home is. She tells him she's looking at his pictures on Facebook. They Skype occasionally, and Karina makes it clear that she can't wait to return to New York City. And this doesn't last long, however, because by September 22nd, Jeremy was pulling away, telling Karina that he's had a wonderful time getting to know her, but because of the distance and their age difference, he knows things will eventually change. He ends this email with, quote, "I'm so glad we met, and I'm really glad you are my friend," end quote. Ouch. Ouch, I felt that one. So Karina wrote back telling Jeremy that she was going to be coming back to New York in July or August, and this time she's going to be staying. And she tells him that she isn't going to ask him to wait for her, but, quote, "I know our situation now probably seems ridiculous, but you are so wrong if you think I'll forget about everything. Yes, we know each other for a short time, but you will always be a man to me, not just a friend. And I know whatever happens, I will keep those times in my memory because I feel like it was something very special to me," end quote. The two continue corresponding, but the emails get further and fewer between, and by March of 2010, Karina writes her heartbreak out in an email to Jeremy, saying, quote, "Now I understand what happened and why you don't write me anymore. I just have seen your page on Facebook. It's hard to describe what I feel. Of course, it's so understandable that you have a girlfriend, but when I didn't know everything was different, everything was like in a pink light. I'm sorry for writing to you all this, but I can't not to. I can't keep it inside anymore. I have never told even 1/10 part of all these words to any man that I write to you, but now I want to. And I even don't care what you think about it now. Those very short time I spent with you was like a miracle from your first hi until your last glance when you smiling was looking at me when I was going away. And since I was gone, there was not a day when I haven't think of you. I was thinking of you so much, too much. I know it was different with you. That's why you probably can't imagine what I feel. And all this time I was cherishing a hope in my mind that one day I'll see you again. It was so stupid, I know. And many times I told myself that I should stop. Moreover, I didn't even know if I'd be able to come to the U.S., but I believed. And what is the most funny, now I'm already waiting for my visa. I even talked to Dr. Malik almost every day about the job. And I was waiting for the spring for so long because in springtime is running very fast and soon the summer will be. But today everything changed, Jeremy. You are a very bright person and I can't wish you anything except happiness. I hope you are happy." End quote. Jeremy wrote back, quote, "I'm so sorry that I hurt you. Due to our age difference and you being halfway across the world, it would not have worked. You are a wonderful woman and the man who gets your attention is going to be very fortunate. I have met a woman that I feel is very compatible with me and someone that I like very much. I hope you will not hurt for long. There are many, many wonderful men in the world and my hope is that you too will find happiness," end quote. Are there many, many wonderful men in the world? If there's anything I've learned from reading the Epstein files, It's that's probably not true. So at this point, from what we can garner from emails between Karina and Jeremy, what do we know about her? We know that she was having trouble getting her visa to bring her back to the US and keep her in the US. From other emails, we also know that she was probably tight on money because once she was back in New York by July of 2010, she was looking for a small apartment with a roommate and low rent. So by the time Karina met Jeffrey Epstein that same year, she was definitely looking for a way to make some extra money or a way to make life more financially easy. So we also know that Karina was going to dental school in Minsk. It seems like this is why she was going back to Belarus occasionally and then returning to the States in the summer. In March of 2010, Karina was emailing with a man named Vasily. Now, some people believe Vasily was Jeffrey Epstein using an alias. And I can understand why, because this guy Vasily does kind of talk like a creepy man. He was giving Karina tips on how to get better at English. He was asking her to send him pictures. He asked her if she was interested in living in America and being a dentist there. Karina said, quote, "Yes, I'm interested in continuing my education in America to become a dentist, but it's really not an easy thing because of our laws here in Belarus. Here we have paid and free educating system. It depends on your marks for the entrance examinations. If you got enough, you may study free of charge, but after the graduation, you have to work 1 year as an intern and then 2 years more in the place where you'll be sent to. If you will not, you have to pay money for all these years to get your diploma. So I study free of charge. That's why I want to come to the US this year and try to spend some money and improve my English, because after my graduation, I won't be able to," end quote. So Karina's basically saying if you're doing well enough academically, which clearly she was, that they will let you attend college free of charge, but there are certain stipulations because after you graduate, you can't just leave the country and go to a different country and bring your talents there when Belarus paid for you to have your education. So you have to basically stay for, it sounds like, about 3 years in the country where you got your education so that you're not just getting your degree and becoming a dentist and then going to a different country and taking the talent away from the country that afforded you the education. Fair enough. Now, as far as Vasily, I don't think this person was Jeffrey Epstein because Karina and Vasily talk about meeting in person. He says, "Don't leave me in a hotel room." So it sounds like they were making a plan to meet in person in Belarus. But that is a rumor that's made its way around the internet. It's actually been reported a few places. I don't think that Vasily was Jeffrey Epstein. But to be honest, I don't think anyone really knows for sure how Karina Shuliak met Jeffrey Epstein. But as I said, I've spent a lot of time with the files. I've spent a lot of time in their emails, and it's weird because it almost feels like I'm part of this movie I've been watching now, and like I know these people and I know their patterns and their behavior, and I kind of know what they mean when they're saying certain things and being passive aggressive. It's weird. I feel like I'm a little bit too close to this right now. So I do have my theories based on the extensive time I've spent with the Epstein files. So we know from the files that Karina had a friend and I believe sometime roommate who was named Katya. And in Epstein's network of women that he placed around himself, there were actually several women named Katya. There was little Katya, big Katya, Siberian Katya, on and on. They gave them nicknames. When there's more than one girl with the same name, you gotta give them nicknames. Now, I believe that Karina's friend and sometimes roommate was the one that Epstein and his assistants referred to as Little Katya. So in January of 2011, someone emailed Epstein and told him that Katya from Belarus was busy that night, but she was free the following day after 3. This person also says, quote, "Dasha can do tomorrow or Sunday. She's just okay, not great, though I think. Katya will write tomorrow morning about her schedule, and another Katya that you've met last week is also available tomorrow anytime. I also should have some new next week," end quote. So this is one of the women that Epstein talks to who enlists and finds other women for him to be intimate with and get massages from, right? We're going to talk more about that. Now, Jeffrey Epstein responded and asked if Dasha is one of the ones that he received photos of. And this person replied and said that Dasha was busy this weekend with modeling assignments. Now, evidence from lawsuits, legal proceedings, and victim testimonies show that Epstein met with multiple young women a day, often scheduling up to 3 separate intimate encounters daily at his various residences. So no matter what city or country he was in, Jeffrey Epstein's schedule was packed and weird. Like, you'll see one day he has a breakfast meeting with a Silicon Valley investor, followed by the name of a girl at 9 a.m., followed by some more business meetings, meeting somebody who's, high up in the world's government, and then followed by the name of another girl around the afternoon time, followed by some more important business meetings, and then the name of another girl later in the evening. It's just very strange. So I want to pull back for a second, and I want to go through the timeline really quickly to understand better exactly what we're dealing with here. It was June of 2008 that Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty to state charges. 1 count of soliciting prostitution from someone under the age of 18, so a minor, and then 1 count of soliciting prostitution. And he was sentenced to 18 months in jail. An arrangement was made with the U.S. Attorney's Office to allow Epstein to avoid federal charges, and he served most of his sentence in a work release program that allowed him to go home and work during the day or go to his office and work during the day. And he only really returned to the jail at night to sleep, and he was allowed visitors. He was allowed all sorts of things that normally nobody would be allowed, especially when pleading to those specific charges. Now, we all know that Jeffrey Epstein got a sweetheart deal, and for a long time, no one could actually figure out why. I mean, I think we all know why, but we don't want to say it out loud. So let's go back again 2 years before that. In 2006, after a lengthy investigation, Palm Beach police concluded there was probable cause to charge Jeffrey Epstein with multiple felony counts of unlawful sexual activity with minors, sexual battery on a minor, and procuring minors for prostitution. Detectives reportedly identified numerous victims. Dozens, actually, many under the age of 18. But instead of filing those charges directly, State Attorney Barry Krischer sent the case to a grand jury. This is an unusual move in a case where the police believed they had strong evidence for multiple serious felonies. So in Florida, the state's attorney can either, press charges, bring charges against a defendant, or they can send the case to a grand jury if they feel like they don't have enough evidence or if they want to get, a second opinion. Usually with a case like this, once again, with the Palm Beach police saying they had tons and tons and tons of evidence, it wouldn't go to the grand jury, but Krischer sent it to the jury. So the grand jury then returned a single count of solicitation of prostitution, which dramatically reduced Jeffrey Epstein's exposure from potential life-altering felony sex charges to something far narrower and more minimal. Now, keep in mind, this was not a charge of solicitation of prostitution from a minor. Not yet, not at this point. It was just solicitation of prostitution, which is a misdemeanor, not a felony. Now, grand jury proceedings are secret, so we don't have a transcript. We don't really know what happened, but the outcome speaks for itself, and I think we're smart enough to read between the lines. We do know that what the grand jury heard was significantly limited. They heard testimony from only 1 victim, and yes, that victim was a minor, but that was not reflected in the charge returned by the grand jury. Obviously, no one understood how the hell that had happened. Palm Beach Police Chief Mike Rader would later say he and his investigators were shocked by this outcome, and the decision of the grand jury was going to create a much weaker starting point for prosecuting Jeffrey Epstein, because even after it goes to the grand jury, you got to prosecute him now. The grand jury is just sort of telling the state's attorney, Barry Krischer, what kind of charges they think he can run with. Now, why did Barry Krischer make the decision to send Epstein's case to a grand jury instead of just bringing charges? Well, the usual, according to him. The evidence might be difficult to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. The victims could face credibility challenges. And he felt that the grand jury would be able to be more unbiased, independently evaluate the evidence, which, as we've already talked about, was never fully presented to the grand jury in the first place. And since Krischer was the one responsible for what evidence the grand jury heard, the limited presentation of that evidence feels, I don't know, let's just say significant, maybe intentional. So after the grand jury returned only the misdemeanor charge, Palm Beach police and some prosecutors felt, hey, this is not right. This case is way too serious for such a minor charge. And the matter was referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office for possible federal prosecution. So federal prosecutors were reportedly drafting a multi-count indictment that could have carried significant prison time. And then Jeffrey Epstein assembled a powerful legal team, including former federal prosecutors and politically connected defense attorneys. And he and his lawyers began negotiating aggressively. Okay? And at this time, the U.S. Attorney's Office was led by Alexander Acosta. And in 2007, Acosta's office entered into what's known as a non-prosecution agreement, which stated that if Jeffrey Epstein entered a guilty plea in the state of Florida to solicitation of prostitution and solicitation of prostitution from a minor, federal prosecutors would agree to not file federal charges related to the investigation. Now, this agreement extended immunity from federal prosecution, not just to Jeffrey Epstein, but to any potential co-conspirators. And the victims of Jeffrey Epstein were not informed of the deal in advance, so they weren't asked if it was okay, what they felt about it, et cetera, et cetera. They didn't find out until we all found out. Now, it goes without saying, but this kind of sweeping federal immunity in a case involving multiple minor victims, it's highly unusual. While we're talking about that non-prosecutorial deal covering Epstein and several co-conspirators, let's go deeper for a moment, because to me, this is unacceptable. This is a huge scope of giving immunity, not just to Jeffrey Epstein, but to any potential co-conspirators. It's sickening, and the agreement did not publicly name those individuals. And that's why the release of these new DOJ files has been incredibly illuminating. We know that the FBI was looking into at least 10 of Epstein's co-conspirators in 2019, but many of those names were still redacted in DOJ files, and this caused some lawmakers to push back, and they were like, hey, these names should be revealed. And the newly released version of the 2019 document shows, I believe it was 4 names that were unredacted. You've got Ghislaine Maxwell, no surprise to anybody. Jean-Luc Brunel, no surprise to anybody. We'll talk about him in great detail. You've got Les Wexner, no surprise to anybody. And then somebody named Leslie Groff. We're going to talk about Leslie. And then there is a 2020 petition that was filed on behalf of one of Jeffrey Epstein's victims. And in this petition, we also see additional names listed as potential co-conspirators: Nadia Marcinkova, Sarah Kellen, and Adriana Ross. All women. How disappointing. Sit tight. We're going to talk about these people. So after Epstein's arrest in 2019 for federal sex trafficking charges, the 2008 deal was brought back to light, and Acosta, who was then the U.S. Secretary of Labor, he had to resign amid the backlash. There should have been more backlash, and there should have been more justice for that, because I would like to know why Acosta felt that he could or should make a deal like that with Jeffrey Epstein and, nameless, countless potential co-conspirators. And once again, this is a theme that I would like to explore more as we go through this entire mess that Jeffrey Epstein and his life ended up being. So Jeffrey Epstein may have gotten off light in the legal system, but the court of public opinion had already found him guilty. And remember, after everything went down in 2008, the media was openly reporting on all the allegations. They were printing every scandalous and shocking detail. They were doing it before 2008, actually, because they were doing it when just allegations and, whispers about what was happening came out. In 2006, the Palm Beach Post reported that the police showed Epstein had committed unlawful sex acts with 5 underage girls, while Epstein's lawyer at the time claimed his client had no idea the untrained girls he had hired for massages were minors. That sounds like admittance to me 5 girls admitting to that. Okay, we don't have a no, that absolutely didn't happen. Jeffrey Epstein, my client, didn't even know these girls. We have the standard, well, he didn't know that they were minors. And the news stories about Jeffrey Epstein, they went into his life, the mystery of how he had amassed his wealth, his high-profile friends and clients, and all the horrifying details of what his victims had claimed, at least what people knew about then. So what I'm saying is anyone with an internet connection, this information would have all been available, easily accessible. And anyone who knew Jeffrey Epstein, even peripherally, would be well aware, not only of his charges, but of the many accusations, right? So it's not just going to be a thing where you type in his name and you're like, oh, he was, found guilty or he pled guilty to 1 count of, soliciting prostitution. No, you would type in his name and it all came up. Everyone was also aware that the deal he got made no sense to anyone and that it had probably been achieved through some backroom deals, and it wasn't because he was like a good person or because what he had done wasn't that bad. It was because of who he was and who he knew that he was able to achieve that kind of just unheard of deal, that non-prosecution agreement. We also have to understand once again that Jeffrey Epstein had multiple women working for him. Some women would do some things, but a lot of these women used the title of assistant, and they would plan and schedule his life. Now, although logically, we know that all of these women knew what was going on, and several of them have been named as unindicted co-conspirators in the 2008 non-prosecution agreement, like his assistant Leslie, like his assistant Adriana, like his pilot Nadia. We have to logically know, and there's plenty of evidence, that these women knew Jeffrey Epstein was a bad person and that he was doing terrible things to women and girls alike. But still, nothing has ever happened to them. But we're going to name them here, and we're going to talk about them because their identities at this point are a matter of public record, and any amount of shame I can bring them will be productive in my book. So let's start with Sarah Kellen, who has also gone by Sarah Kensington, wife of NASCAR driver Brian Vickers from 2015 to 2017 when he filed for divorce. I wonder why he filed for divorce in 2017. Now, I also wonder if Epstein introduced the two, and this was just one of the many love matches he was responsible for making, because Brian Vickers and Jeffrey Epstein had been communicating since at least 2012, which, remember, is years after Jeffrey Epstein was identified publicly and legally as the predator that he was. So Vickers and Epstein, they talked about all sorts of things. They talked about getting together in Paris for dinner, having Thanksgiving together in Florida. Brian Vickers sent Epstein some shockingly inappropriate sexual jokes, etc. Now, in May of 2013, Sarah, who at that time was dating Brian Vickers, she sent an email to Jeffrey Epstein saying, quote, "Any chance you know Aaron's CEO, Ron Allen? Aaron's is who Brian's potential Sprint Cup team, MWR, are trying to get to sponsor him in a cup car for next year. The owners of MWR just called BV about some new articles that were brought to their attention, which are now online about him dating me and bringing up all the past articles on me. It's possible MWR might not be okay with him in the car, but they need to address this now with Aaron's to see where they stand in wanting him to sponsor BV. It might be helpful if you or maybe someone we know knows the CEO. Also, it might be helpful again to have them potentially talk to Ken or Jack." End quote. So we're going to talk about all that in a second, but Sarah also mentions how she's been working with a web reputation company to push negative press about her down the list and to also create new positive content about her that could be moved to the top. And helpful as always, Jeffrey Epstein called the co-owners of MWP, which is a racing team. And Jeffrey Epstein ended up writing back an email that they were good with it, the owners of this racing team, on a personal level, but they had to keep the best interests of the team in mind. So apparently, this is what the two owners who are named Michael Waltrip and Rob Kaufman, in case you're interested. This is what they told Jeffrey Epstein, allegedly, according to him, that they were good with it on a personal level, that Sarah Kellen was named as a co-conspirator in a non-prosecution agreement, that Sarah Kellen had been named by victims of Jeffrey Epstein's, minor and otherwise, that she took part in what he was doing to them. They were okay with that on a personal level. They have to look out for the best interests of the team. Now, we'll talk more about Sarah Kellen as we go along, because although she identifies herself as a victim, I don't agree. Like I said, in lawsuits and victim interviews, she's been described as instrumental in the abuse. She's been described as Ghislaine Maxwell's second in command. Another very prevalent person in Epstein's life, and I would say his most important assistant, was Leslie Groff. Now, if you go to the Department of Justice website and you type in the name Leslie Groff under the Epstein files, her name, just the name Leslie Groff, not even Leslie Groff, her full name comes up almost 164,000 times. And like I said, this is not Leslie being referred to by her first name in emails between Epstein and other people. This is just her full name, and that's because she was basically in charge of his every move. She worked for him for nearly 2 decades, starting in 2001. She stayed working for him while he was in jail for federal sex trafficking charges in, the later years. If someone wanted to fly on Epstein's private plane, Leslie was the one to arrange it. If someone wanted to schedule a meeting or a dinner or a lunch with Epstein, Leslie was the one they reached out to. If Epstein was getting his schedule every day with the names of all these prominent and important people mixed in with the names of random girls that Epstein had to see several times a day, Leslie was the one sending him that schedule. And over the years, Leslie has been named in civil lawsuits, accused of helping arrange massages and travel tied to abuse and trafficking. Now, she has claimed and maintained that she never witnessed anything improper or illegal. She's denied understanding or participating in any illegal activity. But that's very, very difficult to believe because she was named as a potential co-conspirator in the non-prosecution agreement. So was that just because of how integrated she was in his life and they wanted to make sure nothing would happen? Or is that because there was actual evidence? And if you look hard enough and if you start putting things together, you would realize that it would be very, very impossible for Leslie Groff to have been as entrenched in Epstein's world, life, and schedule as she was and not know that something was going on, in my opinion. Actually, I am filming this video at it's 2 p.m. now on March 4th, and I just looked on the internet, and as of an hour ago, CT Insider has reported that Congress wants to talk to Leslie Groff. They sent her a letter dated March 3rd, 2026, and it says, "Dear Ms. Groff, the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform is reviewing the alleged mismanagement of the federal government's investigation into Mr. Jeffrey Epstein and Ms. Ghislaine Maxwell, the circumstances and subsequent investigation of Mr. Epstein's death, the operation of sex trafficking rings, and ways for the federal government to effectively combat them, ways in which Mr. Epstein and Ms. Maxwell sought to carry favor and exercise influence to protect their illegal activities, and potential violations of ethics rules related to elected officials. Due to public reporting, documents released by the Department of Justice, and documents obtained by the committee believes you have information that will assist in its investigation. Accordingly, we request your testimony at an in-person transcribed interview on June 9th, 2026 at 10 a.m. in Washington, D.C. So I cannot wait to hear what Leslie Groff has to say to the committee when she talks to them in June. And you better be sure I'll be updating you because Leslie Groff was very, in my opinion, well aware that something wasn't right with what was going on with Jeffrey Epstein. And I can't say exactly what she knew or how much she took part in, but trust me, there's something going on there. And then there's also Nadia Marcinkova, who deserves her own segment, and we will talk about her in far more depth. Nadia was one of Jeffrey Epstein's private pilots, but she was so much more to him. And she was honestly kind of a public figure in her own right. She was a social media influencer. She was a beautiful, talented, driven woman who, for the life of me, I can't understand why she ended up helping Epstein do what he did. Because not only has she been accused by victims of Epstein, but if you just look at the files and you read their conversations, Nadia's and Epstein's, and you see what she's doing and what she's saying, it's very clear what happened here, in my opinion. And like I said, Nadia was listed as one of those non-prosecuted co-conspirators. So over the years, Epstein had multiple women working as assistants, like I said, doing various things from scheduling appointments to running errands, driving people around, ordering things for him and for his properties. But outside of those women, there were several other women working for Epstein out in the world, befriending young girls and women and pulling them into Epstein's orbit, scouting them out and recruiting them for massages, signing them up to be another name in Epstein's appointment book. Now, Courtney Wild, she's not one of those girls. I'm just transitioning, but Courtney Wild was just a 14-year-old middle school student when she visited Epstein's Palm Beach home in 2002 and met one of his assistants, Sarah Kellen, who escorted her upstairs to Epstein's lair and into his clutches. Now, Courtney has detailed how once she was recruited, she was told that if she didn't want to have sex with Epstein, she could be compensated to recruit other young girls in her place, because Courtney and other girls like her who were high school students and things like that, they were usually targeted because of their financial status, their socioeconomic status. They were from poor, lower class families. They often were dealing with issues at home with their parents, like it wasn't the best environment. And these girls were targeted and offered, hey, we'll pay you $200 if you just give Jeffrey Epstein a massage, which of course we all know it turned into more than a massage. But then when that happened, these girls were like, hey, if you don't want that to happen again, what you can do instead for money is go out there and find more girls to take your place. And Courtney Wild said this, many other victims said this, and sure enough, during a 2005 raid of Epstein's home, police retrieved phone logs with names of teenagers who were called for confirmation to work, and these logs were signed by Sarah Kellen. Now, Courtney Wild was 14 years old when she was first brought into the world of Jeffrey Epstein, but Sarah was 22 years old when she first started working for the Predator, and although I appreciate that she may have been initially a victim, because she and her lawyers, they say that she's a victim, and she may once have been a victim, because 22 isn't, too old to be manipulated and victimized. I appreciate that. I acknowledge it. But the second that Sarah started bringing in others to act as tribute for her in the Hunger Games, she became a predator as well, just like Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, there's also the modeling company angle that Epstein used to recruit girls, and that includes Jean-Luc Brunel and MC2 Modeling, which Epstein paid to finance, I think specifically so that there was a modeling agency that was there that he was partnered in with another predator, Jean-Luc Brunel, so that they could get girls and bring them from different countries and secure them modeling visas so they could bring them to the country and then abuse them. We will have to talk about that at another time because it's very extensive and it goes very deep, and I have plenty of information on that. Okay, so let's go back to Karina. Okay, so let's go back to how Jeffrey Epstein crossed paths with Karina Shuliak. And as I said, it could have been through her friend, Katya, or little Katya. And that's because the timeline of everything really adds up. So in February of 2011, Karina was sending out a lot of emails, desperately looking for a job as a dental assistant or even a cocktail waitress. And she told prospective employers that she'd studied at dental school in Belarus for 4 years. She was bilingual in English and Russian, and basically she was just willing to take anything. Now on March 29th, 2011, someone named Irina sent an email to Jeffrey Epstein saying, quote, "Tonight, Katya is confirmed, 9:30, right? I need some more time for others, but I started talking to Katya about her pretty friend Karina. I think she's 80% agrees to help," end quote. Okay, so Katya was one of these girls that went out there and found other girls for Epstein. And just like that, on March 31st, Irina emailed Epstein and told him that Karina could visit him the following day before work, 9:30 or 10 a.m. Now, I believe this is the same Irina who in 2010 Epstein introduced to Prince Andrew, who at that time was going by the Duke in Epstein's emails. Epstein emailed Andrew on August 11th saying, quote, "I have a friend who I think you might enjoy having dinner with. Her name is Irina. She will be in London 20 to 24, end quote. He means like the 20th through the 24th. And Andrew replies, great. Any other information you might know about her that might be useful to know? Like, what have you told her about me? And have you given her my email as well? End quote. And Epstein wrote back, quote, she's 26, Russian, clever, beautiful, trustworthy, and yes, she has your email, end quote. Of course, Irina was trustworthy because she had been basically recruiting other girls for Epstein for years. Now, remember, around 2001, Jeffrey Epstein trafficked a teenage girl to Prince Andrew, who allegedly had sex with this teenage girl multiple times, according to legal filings made by Virginia Giuffre. Now, Prince Andrew has, of course, denied those allegations, but in February of 2022, he reached an out-of-court settlement with Giuffre, and although Andrew did not admit liability, the settlement reportedly involved a payout estimated in the millions. Now, before that settlement, Andrew's mother, Queen Elizabeth, she had stripped him of his military titles and royal patronages, and since then, Andrew had become effectively a very private, quiet member of the royal family, kind of hidden away because everybody was absolutely embarrassed of him. And this is not all he's done. He's been a problem for the royal family and for the general public just for as long as, he's probably been alive. And of course, we all remember that train wreck of an interview that Andrew gave Newsnight with the BBC. Andrew said a bunch of things during that interview. He was very nervous and very sweaty, and he said he had no contact with Jeffrey Epstein while Jeffrey Epstein was in jail. But now we see from the newly released files that this wasn't true at all. In fact, Andrew was emailing Epstein asking if he could use his beautiful apartment in Paris in 2009 while Jeffrey Epstein was in jail. So a lot of things Andrew claimed in that interview defending himself have turned out to not be true. So I guess the question I have is, can anything he said in defense of himself be considered true if we know that he pretty much lies about even just, his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? Wouldn't he lie about allegations of him being in, the sexual relationships with minor girls, girls under the age of 18? I think that it's safe to say that allegedly, these things they probably have truth to them. Now, on February 9th, 2026, Andrew, who is now legally known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, he was arrested by police on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The investigation focuses on allegations that while Andrew was serving as the UK's trade envoy between 2001 and 2011, he may have shared confidential government information with Jeffrey Epstein. And I mean, the two of them were talking all the time, by email, by phone. They were hanging out all the time. They were going to each other's homes. They were having dinner together. They were besties. Documents and emails reportedly suggest that Andrew shared trade reports and sensitive information from official government work. He discussed investment opportunities with Epstein. He discussed international trips with Epstein, and he maintained contact with Epstein during the time he was representing the UK government abroad. Now, if proven, investigators believe that could constitute a misuse of public office for improper purposes, which is a very serious criminal offense in the UK, could carry life in prison. And Andrew's arrest is pretty much a big deal because it's reportedly the first arrest of a senior British royal in nearly 400 years. And while his arrest is progress, Andrew is just one of the dominoes that needs to fall in this network of the rich and powerful who have lied and laughed in our faces for way too long. I mean, it seems obvious to me and to everyone why Jeffrey Epstein would have wanted to cultivate a network of academics, financiers, politicians, business people, tech leaders, etc. All these people he would want to have around him because association with these people and these kinds of people would give him legitimacy, protection, access to power and wealth, and obviously the aura of importance that Epstein seemed to crave so much. But what's harder to explain, and what we really need to examine, is the other side of that relationship. These were people who had wealth, status, influence, respect. They didn't need Epstein. He needed them. They didn't need him. Yet many of them still attended his dinners, accepted his donations, flew on his planes, communicated with him long after his evil nature was exposed, called him a friend. And I think we have accepted that Jeffrey Epstein sucked, but we need to closely examine all of these other people who had so much to lose, but still compromised it all to keep a relationship with him. Because in my opinion, it means they probably suck too. And they don't deserve to write their association with him off as a mistake or say they didn't know or deny everything until more evidence resurfaces or fade from public view and hope we all forget. And I'm not talking about Prince Andrew, because as far as I'm concerned, Prince Andrew has his own demons. And like I said, it's kind of been known that the dude had issues for a while. When everything about Prince Andrew came out, I'm sure there was a lot of people who weren't surprised. But there's names we're going to talk about. There's names in those files that would surprise you and will surprise you because we're going to talk about them. And you have to wonder, what were these people thinking? We have to examine that. We have to ask that question. Now, as far as Irina, she was sending a lot of different women to Epstein and had been doing so long before Karina Shuliak ever came around. Oh, and before I move on with that, let me tell you about something called the Edge Dinner, or the Billionaire's Dinner, which was held annually by a man named John Brockman. We're calling people out, so let's bring Brockman front and center for his public shaming. Just because, like I said, while I was going through these files and these emails and following Karina's timeline, John Brockman was coming up a lot around this time. So John Brockman is an American literary agent and author who specializes in scientific literature. And in 1996, he founded the Edge Foundation, what he called a nonprofit intellectual network that was intended to be a platform for what Brockman referred to as the third culture, the idea that scientists and technologists were replacing traditional literary intellectuals as society's leading public thinkers. Every year, Brockman would hold a special, fancy, secret dinner with a very exclusive guest list where the gathered attendees would stroke each other's egos, congratulate each other on being rich and smart, and give each other money while indulging in elaborate District 1 style food and drink. Now, despite his scandals and the public knowledge that he was a dangerous predator towards women and children, Jeffrey Epstein found himself with an invite to this Edge dinner, this billionaire's dinner, every single year because he and John Brockman were tight. In March of 2011, while Epstein was drawing all these different women into his web of deceit, the guest list at this Edge dinner included Jeff Bezos, Sergey Brin, co-founder of Google, Ann Wojcicki, co-founder of 23andMe, Bill Gates, Salar Kamanger, CEO of YouTube, Elon Musk, of course, Evan Williams, co-founder of Twitter, and once again, of course, Jeffrey Epstein, who was labeled on the invite to the dinner as a money manager and science philanthropist. Now, was Epstein there at the Edge dinner because he was a billionaire? No. Was he there because he was among the great minds in science and tech at the time? No. He was there because he bought his way in, because tax filings show that Epstein almost entirely funded the Edge Foundation solely by himself. IRS filings from 2001 to 2017 show that $638,000 of the $857,000 received by Edge over this period came from foundations associated with Jeffrey Epstein. And this would give Epstein access to the most prominent figures in the science and tech industries, people he could make connections with, people he could donate to their foundations, fund their pet projects, and add to his growing web of protection, legitimacy, and deceit. And Sarah Kellen was also at these dinners. Here she is in a picture with John Brockman. But it wasn't just business with Brockman and Epstein. It wasn't just a transactional, money exchange. Hey, you fund my foundation and I'll put you in the same room with all these important people. That was bad on its own. But they had a friendship. They had a friendship, John Brockman and Jeffrey Epstein, and a mutual respect for each other. John Brockman would also be in attendance at a dinner at Jeffrey Epstein's place to celebrate his release after his short stint in jail, along with the newly arrested Andrew Mountbatten, aka Prince Andrew the Terrible. And something you need to know, and something we will revisit several times, is that after his 2008 conviction, Epstein was desperate to rehabilitate his reputation. And he used multiple people to accomplish this, who we will also talk about, because I find it to be disgusting that these people helped him get back into like civilized society by using their own contacts and their own influence. But one of these people was John Brockman. Another is Martin Nowak of Harvard University. A lot of people at Harvard, a lot of people at Stanford, a lot of people at MIT. Jeffrey Epstein loved to get close to these people in education, but anyways, the list goes on and on. These people would vouch for him, get him back into rooms where doors had been closed because of what he had done, and they didn't do this because they thought he was genuinely a good guy. Or, I mean, not all of them did. I think John Brockman honestly thought that Epstein was a good guy. He seemed to really, like I said, have an admiration and respect for him. But I think some of these people, they did it because they benefited financially. Now, the Edge Foundation, John Brockman's foundation, is one example. The $6.5 million donation to Martin Nowak's lab at Harvard is another example, which makes it even worse. These people being stupid and able to overlook the depravity associated with Epstein would be one thing, but they sold their souls and they sold out the people of the world for some cash, which is unforgivable. Now remember, I said that John Brockman was a literary client. One of his clients was a man named Lawrence Krauss, a theoretical physicist and cosmologist and a best-selling author. Now he used to teach at Arizona State University, but then there was some allegations of sexual misconduct and then an internal investigation, and then he resigned from the college. Now, Krauss's science outreach organization happily accepted $250,000 from Jeffrey Epstein, and clearly Lawrence Krauss was chatting with Jeffrey Epstein about what one does when they're accused of a crime like this. It actually looks like Epstein was paying, at least in some part, for Krauss's lawyers to combat these sexual misconduct allegations, because Lawrence Krauss forwarded an invoice to Epstein, and Epstein replied, quote, "As a gesture of my friendship, I have sent you $15K. So the invoice was for the lawyers, and it was almost $24K. And Lawrence was like, "Jeffrey, boy, this added up. Are you willing to do the original $25K? So it seems like Jeffrey Epstein had initially agreed to help pay Lawrence Krauss's legal bills. But then it also seemed like Epstein was mad that Lawrence Krauss was paying for these lawyers, since he felt that Lawrence had made a choice to self-destruct repeatedly by taking his own counsel. That's what Jeffrey Epstein said to Lawrence. And this appears to stem from some interviews Lawrence Krauss did with the media, but Lawrence looped Epstein in on everything that was going on with the allegations and the legal action and what people were saying. And when Lawrence Krauss responded to media inquiries, like I said, he did some interviews, Epstein sent him an email saying, "I thought we agreed no comment," right? And this is because Epstein and Lawrence had agreed that Lawrence should just stay quiet and like let his lawyers handle it. And then Lawrence Krauss goes and he's giving media interviews defending himself. And Epstein's like, "Hey, this wasn't the strategy we discussed. Like, trust me, I've been through this already. This sexual misconduct thing, like being accused of crimes of a sexual nature. Like, the best thing to do is not say anything and then just pay a lot of money to lawyers and let them make you like a really good deal where you don't get prosecuted and you get to go to jail, but really you don't go to jail because you're really only sleeping there and you can leave every day to go to your office and work and you can have visitors and stuff. But yeah, just trust me. Like, you should listen to me. Look how easy I got off." But Lawrence Krauss wasn't listening to Jeffrey Epstein. And that's why Jeffrey Epstein was like, "Hey, as a show of my friendship to you, I'm going to give you some of the money for your lawyers, but I'm also going to punish you and I'm not going to pay for the whole thing because you didn't listen to my my advice. Now, Lawrence Krauss has tried to explain this, saying, quote, I sought out advice from essentially everyone I knew when false allegations about me were circulated, end quote. And I'm not going to say whether the allegations at the college where Lawrence worked were true or false, because I don't know. How do I know? Maybe they weren't true. Either way, there was an internal investigation done, and he ended up resigning as a result of that internal investigation. So I don't really know what happened there, but Lawrence said he was as shocked as the rest of the world when Epstein would later be arrested for sex trafficking and that he had no knowledge of these horrendous crimes. But you were talking to Epstein after he'd already been charged with horrendous crimes and after everything he had done to these minor victims had been printed, and you were asking him for advice on your similar situation because of his knowledge, because of the crimes he had committed. So you were aware of the things he had done. But okay, now in July of 2011, Richard Dawkins, a noted evolutionary biologist, emailed John Brockman about his client, Lawrence Krauss. And Dawkins was like, hey, there's this nasty young woman named Rebecca Watson, and she's running a witch hunt against Krauss because Krauss had defended Epstein. And Dawkins wrote, quote, I remember that you told me something of the circumstances of Jeffrey's arrest and that his case is not as black as painted. Might you possibly remind me of it? End quote. So John Brockman then forwarded that email to Epstein saying, quote, FYI, see Richard Dawkins' email below alerting me to a campaign against our friend LMK, Lawrence Krauss. I'll deal with Richard. End quote. So once again, we have John Brockman and Epstein calling Lawrence Krauss a friend. We have Lawrence Krauss saying, like, no, I was just getting advice from him. Like, we definitely weren't tight like that, et cetera, et cetera. And you have all of these people who are working behind the scenes to protect the reputations and the public image of people who have been accused and who have been charged with very bad things. And that's concerning. John Brockman was one of the people who actively worked to protect Jeffrey Epstein's reputation and to rebuild it after he went to prison in 2008. But once again, I don't think he did this simply because of the donations that Epstein was making to his Edge Foundation. I think that he and Epstein were just really good friends. So in 2018, there was a state civil lawsuit that was filed in Florida by an attorney, Brad Edwards, who claimed that the plea deal made by Alexander Acosta violated the Federal Crime Victims' Rights Act by withholding knowledge of the agreement from 36 victims. And it was set to go to trial, but on the first day, the case was settled with the terms being confidential. That's a whole nother conversation to have. But on December 4th, 2018, someone sent Epstein an email that said, quote, John Brockman called to say he's concerned about you. He is watching TV and doesn't like it. He says you are the nicest person he knows. He is thinking about you and available on his cell. End quote. Oh, that's sweet. John Brockman is concerned about Epstein's legal battles and all of these horrible allegations against him. He just wants to make sure Epstein's okay because Epstein's the most amazing person he's ever known. Now back to Karina Shuliak. We talked about how Irina had emailed Jeffrey Epstein on March 31st saying that Karina would be able to come the following day. That would have been April 1st. But remember, one appointment with a girl is not enough for one day in the life of Jeffrey Epstein. And later in the day, on April 1st, Irina emailed Epstein again to tell him that Nadia was coming to her place around 3:30. Irina was going to talk to Nadia, and they would be to his place, Epstein's place, by 4:30. So for the first few weeks in April, Karina is on Jeffrey Epstein's appointment list several times. Don't know what they were doing. Maybe they were just talking. Maybe they were just talking about her future at Columbia and her future as a dentist and how Jeffrey Epstein was going to help her with immigration and get her a visa and all that. They could have been just talking about that. But on April 12th, Leslie Groff sent an email to someone named Dr. Martin Davis, a professor at the Columbia University College of Dental Medicine. Leslie told Davis that Jeffrey's friend, Karina, was considering dental school, and could Davis arrange a tour on the campus? Now, the subject of the email is Dr. Magnani's friend, in reference to Dr. Thomas Magnani, who was a professor at Columbia and also Epstein's personal dentist. practiced. Dr. Davis wrote back and said, hey, usually, we wouldn't be having non-candidate interviews get special tours, but because Tom asked for this favor and Tom worked so very hard for Columbia, Dr. Davis would make an exception. On April 15th, Leslie was asking Dr. Davis what next steps Karina could take that would benefit her, and Davis responded back and said that he would copy in Dr. Zubiar, the director of admissions, to get her up to speed on Karina. Now, here the seeds were planted for Columbia University becoming complicit in allowing Karina Shuliak to skip the line when it came to admissions at their school. But then a plot twist happened. On April 17th, Karina sent Epstein an email, and it says, quote, "Hello, Jeffrey. I am sorry for taking your time, but there is something I have to tell you about. I am glad that I had a chance to meet you, as I think you are a remarkable person, and it's good to know if there are still people in this world who help and care about others the way you do. And I feel grateful, and I do appreciate the efforts you made to help me. I probably didn't seem to be that thankful to you because honestly, I felt very confused about all the situation. I was considering about things a lot and I came to conclusion. I simply cannot accept your help due to some views which strongly stay in my mind, no matter how stupid it may look, but this is my choice. I wish you all the best and apologize if I wasted your time." End quote. What was Karina talking about? What was she talking about? Views she held strongly and she's come to this decision. She can't accept his help. Well, Epstein seemed to know what Karina was talking about because he forwarded her email to Irina with the words, quote, "I guess she read the press," end quote. And Irina wrote back, quote, "Probably, maybe she'll change her mind soon," end quote. So what Epstein's saying is he's trying to pull Karina in and he's doing these favors for her and he's trying to get her hooked up with the people at Columbia so she can go to dental school there. And then Karina, who has internet access, starts looking him up. Who is this guy? Who is this amazing benefactor who wears tailored suits and seems to know everybody and has a seemingly endless supply of money? Who is he? And she found out. She found out what he had been accused of doing in Florida. She found out about the massages and the minor victims and all of that. And she probably emailed Epstein and she was like, I don't really feel good about this. Like, in my view, it's wrong. And so I cannot accept your help, probably because she's like, I don't know what strings are attached with your help. And Epstein forwards it to Irina and he's like, well, guess I got found out, like, guess she used the internet. Is she smart enough to go to dental school? Yeah, obviously she's smart enough to do a Google search, Epstein, but I guess she found out about me. And Irina's like, well, hopefully she'll change her mind. We all did. I did. I changed my mind about you. So many other girls we've manipulated to change their minds, but yeah, hopefully she'll change her mind soon. Now, Leslie, Epstein's assistant, she emailed Epstein on April 18th, and she's like, hey, Dr. Martin Davis says that this information should be delivered by phone. Do you want me to have Karina call Davis, or do you want me to call him myself and get the information? And Epstein replies back with one word, nothing. He's like, do nothing, because he's mad. He's mad that he's doing all of this for Karina, and she has the audacity to question her relationship with a convicted sex offender. But Epstein's not done trying, and he's not done trying because he is an older man who has had many, many years of experience manipulating younger women and gaslighting younger women. So on April 20th, Jeffrey Epstein forwarded Karina some correspondence from Dr. Davis. Remember, Dr. Davis is at Columbia, and basically, this information is Dr. Davis saying, hey, this is what we'll need from Karina, so we can consider her for a student, blah, blah, blah. And Epstein writes to Karina, quote, as you know, I value honesty. I told them that I thought you would make a great candidate. However, for the moment, you had decided that rumors and stories were not something you felt able to cope with. Silly. But as you say, you are entitled to make your own mistakes. End quote. He's like, these are just rumors, okay? Like, you believe rumors over me, somebody you've known less than a month? Now, Karina fires back, quote, Jeffrey, this is not the rumors, stories, and someone's opinion of what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid because I do not know you and I'm not sure what I can expect. I understand that if you help me with my education, I depend on you completely, and you are such a powerful man, and what I'm afraid of is that you may change your mind because of something you might not like. I know you didn't give me any cause to think like that, and I wish I was wrong, but unfortunately, the world is very cruel sometimes, and in most cases, we have to pay a certain price for things. I should say that I have read some information about you in the internet, and even though I understand that some details there may be exaggerated or not reflect reality at all, but it made me feel bad. I cannot know what is true and what is not. I only know what I saw myself, and I want to believe that you are this rare exception, but I don't know if I can trust you. Sorry for this words, but telling you how I feel, and this was the reason for my decision, end quote. I gotta give her credit there because she pushed back and she's like, yeah, I read some stuff, and like, while I want to believe that, you're just this misunderstood person and you're the rare exception, where multiple people are coming out and saying something about you and none of it's true. I don't know what to believe, and I don't know what you're going to expect from me, and I don't really want my fate and my future to be completely in your hands. Don't worry, she's going to change her mind soon. Now, Epstein replied back with one word: ask. Right? He's basically saying, like, why don't you just ask me questions? And then he emails her again a few minutes later and he said, come see me. And then a few minutes after that, as if nothing happened, Jeffrey Epstein emailed Karina, quote, we are going to the Metropolitan Museum at 4:00. You are welcome to meet us there. And then on to see the biggest breast care center, end quote. This is Eva Dubin's breast care center. We're going to talk about Eva in a little bit, but Karina responded back. She thanked him for the invitation, but she said, I'm at work. Enjoy the beautiful weather. And then Epstein wrote back, sorry, I meant sometime in the future. Did you though? Did you really? Is that why you said 4:00, or do you just feel stupid because you tried to impress her with the Metropolitan Museum and the biggest breast care center in the world? And she was like, sorry, I'm working my job. And he was like, I meant later at another time. But no, you said 4:00. So Epstein emailed Karina again, quote, I'm going to leave again Saturday. Would you like to come see me tomorrow around 11? I respect you and your views, though they are both reflective of no real facts and a refusal to accept that there are no guarantees in any situation. I have no intention of trying to convince you otherwise. I told the school dean today that I made a mistake and apologized for wasting the time of him and his staff. I suggested that you were probably too young to realize the opportunity, but maybe we could revisit it next summer, end quote. Karina's response was, quote, I apologize for wasting your time as well, Jeffrey. Yes, I can come see you tomorrow around 11 if you have time, and then I have to be at work at 1 p.m., end quote. So then Epstein replied back, because now he knows she's got an out. She's got to get to work at 1, and he needs more time. He's like, well, come at 10:30 if possible. And then just like that, they seem to be back on. Because on April 25th, Epstein emailed Karina and told her that he was inviting her to Woody Allen's dinner the following Sunday, May 1st at 7 p.m. He said, quote, I want to make sure you have not changed your mind, end quote. Karina replied, quote, Jeffrey, this is awesome. Thank you so much. I have not changed my mind. Will it be at your place? End quote. Epstein emailed back saying, of course it's at my place. And then he emailed her later that day. Quote, Sue, Jen, and I are on my island in the Caribbean. Sue suggested that I invite you. I told her you would be hesitant. However, you are invited to my island if you wish. You could come Thursday and fly back on my plane Saturday, end quote. Okay. He's like, the Metropolitan Museum didn't impress you? Well, how about this? I have an island in the Caribbean and a private plane. Okay, so we have help getting into Colombia. We have invitations to fancy dinners with Woody Allen, the man famous for marrying his stepdaughter, who he had known since she was 10 years old. And I mean, as we know, Epstein and Woody, they were close. They were neighbors in New York City. They felt the same about a lot of things. Woody and his wife/daughter had dinner with Epstein all the time. Epstein arranged for Woody and his daughter/wife to tour the White House in 2015 through Epstein's other friend, Kathy Rumler, who was at that time the former White House counsel for Barack Obama and a corporate lawyer with Goldman Sachs. We have to talk about Kathy for a minute. We do. I'm sorry. I know you want to see what's going to happen with Karina and the fancy dinner at Woody Allen's. And I'm going to tell you. But first, we have to talk about Kathy. Okay, Kathy Rumler, lawyer. She was the White House counsel for Barack Obama. In 2020, I believe, she started working for Goldman Sachs. She became a top lawyer there. And she has said a lot of things about Jeffrey Epstein because her association with him had become public knowledge, not as public as these recent DOJ released files have shown. But before the DOJ files were released, Kathy Rumler said, listen, we weren't friends. We were, it was just business. I regret knowing him. He's a monster, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we find in the emails that Kathy and Jeff Epstein were a lot more close than she had let on before this. I think she called him Uncle Jeffrey or Uncle Jeff in one of the emails. In another email, she said she adored him, that it was like having an older brother. She also helped him with his legal strategy when he was under some fire about the things he was doing later on. And he gave her gifts. He gave her an Hermes bag, a fur coat. He gave her spa treatments. They talked all the time. I mean, jokes. They talked about the personal lives, et cetera, et cetera. They were very tight. So basically, Jeffrey Epstein contacts Kathy Rumler because she's got ties to the White House. And he's like, hey, can you get Woody and his wife/daughter into the White House for a tour? He said, I think, Woody might be seen as too politically sensitive. And Kathy told Epstein, no problem. She was like, Woody's fine, but maybe you, Epstein, yourself are a bit too politically sensitive to be touring the White House. So, I mean, obviously she knew that there was scandals around him. Obviously, he wasn't too politically sensitive for her to meet with him multiple times that same year, not too politically sensitive to be chatting it up in emails. Huh, Kathy? That same year, in June, Kathy sent Epstein an email talking shit about Elizabeth Warren. Okay, Kathy said she was working on a public relations strategy for Mary Jo White via Elizabeth Warren, and she says that Elizabeth Warren is the worst. That's what Kathy Rumler says to Epstein. Elizabeth Warren, EW, is the worst. Just days before this email was sent from Kathy to Jeffrey Epstein, Senator Warren had sent a scathing letter to Mary Jo White, who was the head of the SEC at the time. And Warren was criticizing White's leadership, saying she was failing to enforce security laws. Warren said that White wasn't protecting the public from corporate wrongdoing in large financial institutions, and Warren went for White's throat. She said, hey, I've noted that you've had to recuse yourself from nearly 50 investigations of the SEC because your husband, John White, is a corporate defense lawyer at a firm that had actively engaged in defending clients under SEC investigation. That does seem like a bit of a conflict of interest, I would agree. Well, listen, this is another instance of showing you it's not about politics. And I'm going to come back to this several times when we talk about Jeffrey Epstein, because this is the greatest example of how politics don't actually matter. Behind the scenes, people who are on the same side politically are going after each other and trying to take each other out. People who are on different sides politically are chumming it up and, smoking cigars and toasting their $500 a drop scotch and lavishly appointed rooms while they trade secrets and government secrets and business secrets and give each other tips on the stock market. Like, this has nothing to do with politics. But in this situation, okay, because Mary Jo White, who was heading the SEC, she was married to a corporate lawyer who was defending a lot of firms that were being investigated by the SEC. And because there were 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans on the SEC, Mary Jo White having to constantly recuse herself had caused issues. It had deadlocked key cases and in some instances blocked prosecution of these firms that were being investigated altogether. So now Kathy Rumler, she's a corporate lawyer, and she's like, screw Elizabeth Warren and her attempts to protect the people from corporate abuse. Didn't she get the memo that politicians aren't supposed to actually care about people or help them or do anything productive? She's the worst. And Kathy Rumler is having this conversation with known convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, getting his take on it. Now, did Kathy commit a crime by doing this? Not really, no. But morally, is it disgusting? Yes. This email exchange and her relationship with Epstein reflects how these elite networks operate behind the scenes. The elite figures defend each other and protect each other while the general public is left to fend for themselves. These political and corporate actors are cooperating behind the scenes, even against other public figures who are trying to do something right for once. They all get away with the highest level of crimes while the average person is being thrown in jail for far less. They use the power we give them to gain money and influence, and they don't use that money and influence to help the people who gave them the power. It's used to benefit themselves and their friends. Now, Kathy Rumler is talking to Jeffrey Epstein about stuff that's going on in government. And she's like, Elizabeth Warren's the worst. I'm devising a strategy to make her look bad, basically. Now, does that mean that the SEC or Mary Jo White enlisted the help of an outside corporate lawyer to do PR work? Maybe. That seems to be what Kathy and Jeffrey were chatting about. I don't know for sure, but that would be kind of a strange thing if the SEC was doing that. But anyways, Mary Jo White would continue to allow financial firms to break the law during the rest of her time at the SEC. And after she left the agency, she began working for a firm called Debevoise in Plimpton, a place she had already worked before becoming the SEC chair. And at that point, she used all of her knowledge to help big corporations get out of sticky situations. Most notably, she would eventually become the personal lawyer of the Sackler family, one of the most disgusting crime families to ever exist. The very same people behind Purdue Pharma and the opioid epidemic that has killed hundreds and thousands of Americans. Oh, she also helped defend Les Wexner, too, another really good buddy of Epstein and another unindicted co-conspirator who got away squeaky clean when that weird deal was made by Alexandra Acosta. Anyways, let's go back to Karina Shuliak, because there's only so much of the real talk about what's happening in the world around us that we have no control over, that we can take at one time. So anyways, Karina Shuliak is now excited to have dinner at Epstein's house with Woody Allen. She can overlook the sex crimes and the dozens of minor victims who were irreparably harmed if her affiliation with Epstein benefits her. She didn't want to be an average citizen like us at the whim of the powerful elite. She wanted to be counted amongst the powerful elite. And Epstein told Karina to wear the blue dress, and she asked him, "Do you mean the blue dress you've already seen me wearing, or just any blue dress?" And Epstein replied back, quote, "The one you wore to my house. Thanks for asking. Also, Sultan from Dubai will be there, the daughter of the Australian Prime Minister, Catherine Keating, and Steve Koslin, head of psychology at Harvard and Stanford. I'm glad you will get to experience this. Also, after we are going to go to Vera Wang's apartment with the group," end quote. Oh my God, I can't stand him. I cannot stand him. Isn't Jeffrey Epstein just a peach? Giving a poor little girl from Belarus all of these experiences and just name dropping and just throwing names around to be impressive. And, Vera Wang's apartment after dinner. We're going to have dinner with all these very important people. You heard that. Harvard and Stanford again. Harvard, Stanford, MIT. It's all going to come up multiple times. All these very important people, the great minds of the world. And we're going to go to Vera Wang's after dinner. And so Karina wrote back, quote, "Yeah, it's going to be a very unusual experience for me. Well, thank you for inviting me once again, though I don't know why you did decide to do that, Jeffrey. I have one more question for you. You know that we are friends with Kate, and honestly, I feel bad not telling her about you. And when she asks, I have to avoid this theme somehow. Can I tell her?" End quote. Now, I believe Karina is referring, once again, to Katya, who is sometimes referenced as Kate in the files and in the emails. Now, there is another Kate in Epstein's emails, however, Kate Valentinova, who also seems to have recruited girls for Epstein. In February of 2010, Valentinova emailed Epstein, quote, "I have a girl from Ukraine. She is 24, beautiful. She's going to be in New York in June. I will send you pictures later. I'm dying here. Her name is Julia. She has a perfect body and 100% blonde. Let me know if you like her," end quote. Kate also talks with Epstein about wire transfers. He's transferring her money. She talks about modeling in Russia, where she's recently been asked to become the face of a cosmetic clinic. Obviously, Jeffrey Epstein is sending Kate money in exchange for girls that she's sending his way. She's also sending him pictures, whether they are of her or other girls that she's potentially lining up for him, or both. And whenever they're in the same place, Kate Valentinova is meeting with Epstein in person. And Kate knows how to work a man like Jeffrey Epstein, who has low self-esteem and needs his ego stroked 24/7. Because in March of 2010, she emailed him, quote, I can't find any boyfriends because of you. You are an ideal image. I'm telling you about your personality. I had known you for 3 months in New York, 3 years later, after meeting thousands of men around the world after different situations. In my and something what I know from yours, I still feel your special energy. Unbelievable. I have just one question. Was you born like that, or you make yourself by yourself? End quote. Kate was a model based out of Moscow. And no matter who she was or what she did, we all know that weird ass Jeffrey Epstein was not her ideal man. She just wanted the wire transfers to keep coming, and she was always emailing him asking if they'd gone through yet. He's like, oh, they're international transfers. They take time. She's like, well, I really need the money. Like, is the transfer gone through yet? Just gross. So by mid-April of 2011, Karina Shuliak was already getting the coveted invite to Epstein Island, but sadly, she could not make it. Not this time, at least. She emailed back on April 26th after Epstein was like, hey, Sue said I should invite you, but, to my island in the Caribbean, and I can bring you there on my private plane. Sue said I should invite you, but you might feel uncomfortable. And so Karina emailed back saying, quote, hi, Jeffrey. Sorry for my late respond. Thank you so much for your invitation. It sounds just amazing to me. It is true what you said about being hesitant, but I also need to be in the city these days as I have things with my lawyer about my papers, but thanks a lot anyway. I hope you have a wonderful time there. End quote. So after the May 1st dinner with Woody Allen at Epstein's place, Karina is now in contact with all sorts of people, including a sultan and author Stephen Koslin, who offers to send her his book. And he's emailing her after the dinner, and he's like, it was so great to meet you at the dinner. And she's like, so great to meet you too, Mr. Koslin. And he says to her, quote, first, please call me Stephen, ... unquote. Okay, so Professor Stephen Koslin, former chair of the psychology department and dean of social sciences at Harvard University, a brilliant man, really, truly a brilliant man, which is why it's so disappointing to talk about him in this situation. He was an early founder of cognitive neuroscience, and between 1998 and 2002, Harvard University received $200,000 in donations from Epstein to support Koslin's research, something that I guess Koslin didn't disclose in documents when he supported Epstein's application to be a visiting fellow in the psychology department in 2005. Now, Koslin and Epstein allegedly shared an interest in and collaborated on a theory called social prosthetic systems. So if you look up those 3 words in the files, social prosthetic systems, you won't find anything. But look up SPS and a whole world opens for you. What are social prosthetic systems? Well, this is a theory developed by Stephen Koslin, where individuals recruit others to act as extensions of themselves, effectively lending parts of their brains to help accomplish goals. So basically, while traditional prosthetics replace physical body parts, social ones augment the mind and social capabilities, right? Does that make sense? It's really interesting, actually. So in 2009, Epstein encouraged Koslin to think about how deception was fundamental to his SPS system. And he would argue all living systems. Epstein's like, let's talk about how deception and being a liar and dishonest about everything is super important to just living and being alive. So Koslin wrote an email to Epstein in 2007, and this email was titled Sex and the SPS Guy. And in it, he says a lot of things, okay? But I'm going to just pull a few important points. He says, quote, hello, Jeffrey. I've been thinking more about the virtues of sex with a 40-year-old woman who you know well and have come to love. This is a good thing. Here's why. Older women are better able to be intimate partners. With age and experience comes sophistication, allowing them to see you more clearly and provide more useful feedback, and hence, to be better at helping you grow. Personal growth is important. To the extent that one grows, one knows one's own strengths and weaknesses and becomes better able to interact with others. This, in turn, brings one closer to God in the SPS sense, and with all that it implies. With all that implies. Ergo, sex is not just about the pleasure of the flesh, it's also about pleasure of the mind, and older women are better able to provide such sophisticated and nuanced-minded sex. End quote. Epstein replied to this. Spoiler alert, he didn't agree, because he likes very young women, and also someone like Epstein is not going to want to improve himself, right? He's not going to want to be with a woman who challenges him to see himself differently or work on his weak self-esteem and his overblown ego. No, that's why he likes younger women. So Jeffrey Epstein responds. He's like, yeah, I don't agree with this. Well, you tried, Coslin. You tried. And Coslin's over here like, let's talk about healthy and productive topics. And Jeffrey Epstein is like, let's talk about deception and how it's like good for people. And you see this a lot. Jeffrey Epstein talking with actually intelligent people who are experts in their fields, who have done decades of research, and he's trying to keep up in a very rudimentary way because he's actually very narrow-minded and he can never keep up with these people intellectually. And there are quotes of people who have talked to him and realized this. I'll try to find them if I can. I was looking around, but that wasn't the most important thing on my mind. But there's people who've been like, yeah, that guy's just a total idiot. He tried to sound smart. Stephen Coslin did take advice from Epstein when navigating business deals, like when he was negotiating with Stanford University to become the director of their Center for Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences. He introduced Epstein to other people in the field. He hung out with him whenever he was in town. He even visited Epstein when he was in jail. But you can tell when Stephen Coslin is talking to Epstein about these different psychological concepts and actually intelligent things, he's humoring Epstein into thinking that Epstein has anything productive to add to the conversation. So now Karina and Stephen Coslin are on a first name basis, and she's in a group email with him and a sultan and all sorts of important people, and Karina's coming over to the dark side. From then on, Karina and Epstein began seeing each other quite a bit, and he was helping her in every way possible. I guess that Karina had some skin issues, including acne, and so Epstein had another one of his assistants, Susan Rodriguez, make an appointment for Karina with a skincare doctor. Yes, we are going to talk about Susan Rodriguez. I know there's a lot going on out there about her, and the fact that she was, cooking stuff up, and that I did a lot of research into her. Apparently, she's got some daughters. Epstein was sending them to boarding school, paying for it. I did some digging. I found out that the girl she was calling her daughter was not actually her daughter, allegedly. I need to do some more fact checking, but yeah, there's stuff going on there with Susan Rodriguez. But either way, Epstein has Susan Rodriguez make Karina an appointment with a skincare doctor. And he tells her, it's my treat. Just set a time and I'll pay for it. And then he says, can you come tomorrow at 10? Not like, can you go to the doctor tomorrow at 10? But like, I'll set the appointment and pay for the doctor. Come see me at 10. Epstein's also talking to Karina about setting up some tests with Kaplan University. He's like, I'll pay for it. Don't worry. And while this conversation was happening, Epstein was in Africa. And he was like, you can pay for it now. And like, I can help you pay for it, or you can wait till I get back. Now, what was Epstein doing in Africa? Because he's in Africa a lot. Unfortunately, that's a story for another day. Don't forget that we have to talk about that. So Karina told Epstein that she could start the DAT, which is like a testing for dental students, in the middle of June after she applied for her immigration papers. We're going to see that Epstein is going to help Karina get U.S. citizenship. They try for a few years to do it certain different ways. They try to just apply normally. And then he's like talking to some immigration lawyers. He even started talking to people in government who had connections with immigration. And eventually he just has her marry somebody. We're gonna talk about that. He has her marry somebody, a woman, another woman he knows, and that is what gets her U.S. citizenship. And eventually, of course, Karina will divorce this woman because they were never in love or wanted to be married to begin with. And apparently Epstein wanted to marry her. So we'll talk about that. So then Epstein returns from Africa, and the very next morning, Karina was at his place in New York. On May 23rd, Leslie emailed Karina telling her that Jeffrey had asked for Leslie to look into tickets to the Phantom of the Opera for Karina's birthday. When would Karina like to go? Leslie also confirmed that Karina would be at Epstein's at 9:30, at which time Leslie would just give Karina the printed out tickets for Phantom of the Opera. On May 26th, Leslie emailed Karina again, and she's like, hey, Jeffrey would like to treat you to dinner at Bluefin in Times Square after the Phantom of the Opera show, and the dinner reservations are going to be under your name. So Leslie sets up this reservation directly with the restaurant, and Leslie makes it very clear, hey, we don't want Karina to be presented with a check because Jeffrey Epstein is going to be taking care of the bill. Leslie was then informed that she didn't have to worry about a check. Steve was going to cover it. Now, this is Steve Hansen. He's founder of Be Our Guest Incorporated, which launched multiple restaurant hotspots and chains. And it seemed Epstein did have some meetings with Hansen, that they knew each other. And in 2012, Hansen's assistant returned some test results that Epstein had requested for a sample of beef jerky. Okay, beef jerky is another big thing in these Epstein files. We will eventually talk about it. Apparently, Epstein wanted the beef jerky tested for nutritional value, and the email says the test results are attached. I don't see them because, once again, these are files, so if they don't put them in there, we're not going to see them. I didn't see the test results for the beef jerky, but in December of 2012, Steve Hansen asked Epstein how he liked that beef jerky. And Epstein replied, quote, not very good. Apparently, Steve was making and shipping a bunch of beef jerky to Epstein's island. And someone emailed Steve on December 21st saying, quote, hi, Steve, on Jeffrey's Island is requesting the latest beef jerky recipe as J.E. has asked her to try and make some. He says the last batch that you made tasted different, and I think he likes it, and he would like her to attempt it. Would it be possible to forward us the recipe? End quote. So when I say someone sent an email, it means it's because that person's name is redacted. And when I said blank on Jeffrey Epstein's island, it's because that name's redacted as well. So basically, someone on Epstein's island wanted the beef jerky recipe from Steve Hansen so that they could make it for Jeffrey because Jeffrey likes it. So Steve Hansen replied and said that they didn't have the type of beef that Jeff likes. He means the people on Epstein's island, they don't have the type of beef that Jeffrey Epstein likes. And he said that was why there was an issue with the last batch, because they didn't use the right beef. So there's a lot of talk about beef jerky and Steve Hansen making beef jerky and sending it there, and Steve Hansen giving someone and Jeffrey Epstein the recipe for the beef jerky. And then eventually a chef that's connected to Steve Hansen is actually going to go and work for Jeffrey Epstein on Epstein's island. So the beef jerky situation will be handled. Actually, the first thing that this chef does is give Jeffrey Epstein and Karina and other people who are employed by Jeffrey Epstein basically a cooking class, and he's just teaching them how to make beef jerky. So after the Phantom of the Opera, after the Bluefin dinner, Karina emailed Epstein saying, quote, I don't even know how to express all my huge thank you. It's just an awesome present what you did. Thank you so, so much, end quote. And Jeffrey Epstein responded back with a non-committal, nonchalant, happy BD, because at this point, now he knows he's got her. He's got her with all the money and the lavish gifts and the whining and dining. And a week later, Epstein writes, quote, give me a date for your next theater experience, ballet, orchestra, another Broadway show, your choice. I want you to grow, end quote. Yeah, he's her mentor. So Karina and Epstein, they're getting closer. They're vibing. Every time he wants her to come over, she's there. It's all working out until June 11th. When Epstein tells Karina that he's going to organize the best steak in New York for her, if she's free. By 11:01 p.m. on June 11th, there are signs that Karina and Jeffrey may have had a little lover's tiff over the best steak dinner in New York, because Epstein emailed Karina saying, quote, nice night, thanks. I will call the attorney on Monday morning. I will not see much more of you. It is too tedious to hear why so many things are wrong, weird, not right, improper, impolite. Anyway, good luck, end quote. Karina writes back, quote, does that mean we will not see each other anymore? End quote. And Epstein replies, quote, you yourself said you saw little reason if, after doing your best to get the kid out of the way of the car, there was nothing that you could do. You would not want to watch as the car, reality in your instance, slammed into her. Instead of a thank you for helping my friend Katya, I am told you are a liar. You make me feel weird. I find that impolite. I do not appreciate that. But my parents think X, but my friends think Y. However, I will gladly continue to help with skin, as after 4 to 5 months, no matter how stubborn and entrenched in self-destructive ideas you are, the results will be clear and incontrovertible. And though you might tell me that your parents grew up with acne and your grandmother, entire generations suffered from acne, and they think it's okay that you were able to finally do something that he had never imagined, end quote. Okay, that's a lot to unpack. Let's do it. Okay, so I had kind of analyzed this text or this email, and I want to tell you what my analysis was. So obviously, this message is a lot of things. It's manipulative, it's condescending, which is consistent with the tone seen in many of Jeffrey Epstein's emails to Karina and almost all the women that he talks to. He clearly has no respect for women and he hates them. So when you break it down, Jeffrey Epstein's essentially doing three things at once. He's defending himself from something. He's reframing any criticism Karina has as irrational, and he's positioning himself as someone who knows better than everyone else around her, such as her parents and her friends. So the kid in the road car analogy is interesting. He's referencing something that Karina apparently said earlier in a conversation, like an analogy about someone trying to help someone if they don't want help. What he seems to be arguing is that if someone's about to be harmed by reality, aka the car in the analogy, and you try to help them avoid the reality or the car, you shouldn't be blamed if they refuse help and still get hit. So in other words, he's saying, I tried to help you and help your friend Katia and give advice. If you reject it, that's your choice, but don't blame me, which is fair. It's a fair thing to say, but the way he's framing it is as in like, no one else's opinion matters. Everyone else doesn't want what's best for you. I want what's best for you. So it's basically a philosophical metaphor where Jeffrey Epstein's trying to frame himself as a rational helper rather than someone like being manipulative and interfering and trying to create a transactional relationship between himself and Karina where he gives her all this stuff. And so that means in return, she has to give him everything that he wants, as well as her unquestioning loyalty and basically like, don't talk back, don't question me about anything. And then he is clearly offended. He says, instead of, saying thank you for helping my friend Katia, you tell me I'm a liar. You make me, feel weird. It's impolite. Everything I do is like weird to you, or you have a problem with it. He's expecting gratitude for whatever advice or involvement that he had regarding her friend Katia, which who knows what that is. And apparently, Karina found something that Jeffrey did or said to be disingenuous, or she had found out, probably through Katia, that it wasn't exactly as he had described. And so he's framing her normal reaction as being irrational and rude, and he's being defensive, right? He's also casting himself as the adult in the room and her just being like childish and woman-like, being emotional or influenced by others. Like, you're not smart enough or old enough to know better. I mean, he was older than her. He's dismissing her parents and her friends. Stop listening to what your parents or your friends say about me. Like, they don't understand me. They don't understand us. This is classic isolation. It's a move often seen in manipulative communication. Then we got the skin treatment part, right? We know that Jeffrey Epstein's been helping Karina with her skin. She suffered from acne. Apparently now we know that her family for generations has suffered with acne. And he's basically saying, like, I'm done. We're done. Like, I can't be around someone who doesn't trust me or view me as the noble and amazing person I am, but I'll still help with your skin, even if you're too stubborn to appreciate it, because after a few months, you'll see that I was right. And your family might think that acne is just a normal part of life or genetic, but I'm going to show them that I can fix it, and I'm going to show you. So the overall tone and strategy is, I'm just trying to save you from reality. You're accusing me unfairly, once again. Your parents and your friends don't know and they don't understand, and you will see that I'm right in time. He writes this email as if he's intellectually superior, misunderstood, and he's just trying to help someone, and he doesn't expect anything in return. He's just trying to help her, and she's, too suspicious. Now, once again, it's clear to me that while they had their steak dinner, Karina expressed something she was uncomfortable with about what he was doing or his behavior in general. And once again, his response is so telling because it is exactly what abusive, manipulative people do. He minimized her feeling, and then he he got defensive. Basically, like, how dare you even say that to me? Instead of acknowledging it, instead of saying, I could understand why you feel that way, let's talk about it, your feelings are valid, he minimized her feelings, and then he got defensive. And instead of answering how she felt, he made her feel like she had hurt him. So now it became about his feelings and not about her feelings. So classic predator behavior. He's trying to make her feel guilty. All I've done for you, you still do this to me. And Karina, she kind of fell for it. She wrote back saying, quote, Jeffrey, when I said liar, it was a joke. According to that very moment, I thought you knew that. I don't know how many times I told you thank you and how much I appreciate your help, but maybe it was not enough then if you don't feel that I'm really grateful to you and it makes me feel bad. I understand if you are tired to hear things which can be so natural to you but are not to me. I agree that some of them doesn't really make sense and I simply have to be more open. And there are also certain things which I did not accept, and not because I think they are wrong in general, but to me specifically, they don't feel good. Anyway, Jeffrey, it's sad to me that you don't want to see me anymore because I enjoyed spending time with you. But if it's now difficult to you, I understand. Thank you for everything, end quote. So here's what I'm thinking. How was Epstein helping Katya? And why did whatever he was doing seem to upset Karina? Well, I can't be sure, but I know that Epstein had an appointment with Katya on May 24th and another on June 13th at 10 a.m. What I think is that Epstein told Karina that he was paying Katya to come and massage him. And she knew in her terminology of what the relationship between her and Jeffrey Epstein was, what massaging meant, which was sex and sexual activity. And Karina's like, what the heck? And Epstein's probably trying to, like, at this point already, starting the early seeds of, hey, it's okay for me to be with multiple women. It's just because I'm a man and I have so many, like, needs. And she's like, I don't feel right about that. Like, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying for me, I don't like it. And that's probably what's happening. But by June 13th, it seems that things have begun to repair between Epstein and Karina because he sent her an email telling her that he had organized to have a helicopter take her around Manhattan. But I think Karina was placing a little bit of emotional distance at this point. She's probably like, okay, I'm not going to, like, be this man's girlfriend or a serious relationship with him, but I'll give him what he needs to a certain extent so I can continue to reap the benefits of what he gives me. Now, a few days later, Leslie emailed Karina asking if she had settled on a date for her and little Katya to go see The Lion King. They decided on June 26th at 3 p.m. And when Karina is told that Epstein would be in town and would like to see her after the show, she replies, sure, I will. On June 27th, Epstein asked Karina which pharmacy she used to fill her Accutane, and she replied, Duane Reade. Now, it seemed that not only was Epstein helping Karina get appointments with doctors to fix her skin, he was paying for those doctors and paying for her prescriptions. So he's paying for her prescriptions for the doctors. He's paying for all doctors, all prescriptions for her. And in March of 2012, Epstein would email Eva Dubin, and he would ask her to call into Duane Reade to fill a script for diflucan for Karina. Diflucan is a medication used to treat yeast infections. Now, here's where we talk a little bit about Dr. Eva Dubin and the part she played in Epstein's life and dealings. Eva Dubin, a Swedish-born former model who dated Jeffrey Epstein for much of the 1980s. Their relationship lasted from 1981 to 1990. They started dating the year after she was named Miss Sweden, and the same year she placed fourth runner-up in the Miss Universe contest. But Eva was never just a pretty face. And if there wasn't so much tying her to Jeffrey Epstein, she would be a woman to be admired. In high school, she graduated first in her class. She attended the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm for 3.5 years before transferring to UCLA School of Medicine in 1985, earning her MD from there in 1989. After a long relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, Eva married billionaire hedge fund manager Glenn Dubin in 1994, but they were a modern type of couple because it never seemed that Glenn was jealous of his wife's close relationship with her ex, Jeffrey Epstein. And Jeffrey Epstein would end up investing millions in Glenn Dubin's hedge fund, and he helped J.P. Morgan acquire Glenn Dubin's firm, so they were tight. Both Eva and Glenn maintained a close friendship with Epstein after his arrest. In fact, Eva Dubin told his parole officer that she was 100% comfortable having Epstein around her children, and Epstein was even the godfather to one of her daughters. Now, in 2002, Eva was sadly diagnosed with breast cancer, and in 2004, she joined the Mount Sinai Board of Trustees, later creating the Dubin Breast Center at Mount Sinai Hospital, which opened in 2011. Now, Eva and Glenn Dubin would be very generous with this center, donating approximately $19 million and helping to raise an additional $24 million. Of course, Eva turned to her good friend Jeffrey Epstein for donations while raising money. That is to be expected. The files show that Epstein discussed using many of his various entities to donate at least $400,000 to Mount Sinai between 2010 and 2016, sometimes through direct donations, sometimes through buying tables at a luncheon, etc. And these donations bought Epstein access to the hospital that he would never have had otherwise, access he used for himself and for several women he was in contact with. So he's not just using it for Karina. He's using Eva Dubin and Mount Sinai for a bunch of different things. So, for instance, in April of 2012, Jeffrey Epstein was communicating with a young Russian woman who asked him if he minded if she had sex with someone else without using a condom. And Epstein replied back, quote, "Not yet. You must first go to the gyno. I just hung up on Eva. She's going to call you." End quote. So an email later that same day from Epstein to this woman said, quote, "Did Eva call you? Do you have off from school Friday for holidays? Eva will organize pussy doctor." End quote. He also is asking this same girl if she filled out her volunteer application. And in an email with Eva Dubin, Epstein is communicating that this girl wanted to volunteer at Eva's breast cancer center at Mount Sinai Hospital. And Eva replied, quote, "Great, what type of visa does she have? If she has a green card or American citizenship, she should contact Cynthia Levy and say she's a good friend of mine and say she wants to volunteer. If she has another type of visa, she should call me and we could talk about it." End quote. This woman then emailed Epstein and said that Eva had given her the number of a doctor, but the doctor wanted to know how she was going to pay, and Epstein said, of course, he's going to pay for that doctor. Now, this woman also followed up by asking for the money for her school, as she needed to pay that the following day. This woman did end up getting the volunteer position at the Dubin Breast Cancer, working at their help desk. And when it was made official, Eva forwarded Epstein the email saying, quote, "FYI, we made some progress. I told them she will only sit there and look pretty." End quote. A few months later, Epstein emailed Eva saying there was an emergency. He and the same Russian woman had been at his island, Epstein's island. The Russian woman had fallen off an ATV. She had a gash across her forehead, and it needed medical attention immediately. They were going to fly back to New York. Eva told Epstein that Dr. Jess Ting, one of Mount Sinai's plastic surgeons, was standing by. She told Epstein to call her as soon as they landed, and she would go with him and the woman to see Dr. Ting. Now, Epstein later wrote an email to one of his assistants telling her to buy proper first aid kits for 71 Street, which is in New York. He said large ones, and then he asked where the defibrillator was. He said that the Russian woman had a bad accident on the island and, quote, "Dr. Ting put 25 stitches in her head laid out on the dining room table," end quote. Okay, so we're going to talk about the potential issues with this. First of all, how do we know this woman fell off an ATV? How do we know that Jeffrey Epstein didn't, hurt her, beat her, do something to her? We don't know. Dr. Dubin, Dr. Eva, Jeffrey Epstein's friend, and Dr. Ting, the plastic surgeon at Mount Sinai, they're just accepting that this is what happened, because if that woman had gone into an emergency room, they would have questioned her about that, as they should. So, of course, Dr. Eva Dubin is there to see this woman get stitched up on Epstein's dining room table and to also give the woman antibiotics, just to be safe. Now, Dr. Margaret Moon, who's an expert of medical ethics at Johns Hopkins, told the New York Times that this incident was so stunning and breathtaking. She said with such serious wounds, that patient should have been seen at the emergency room. That is a lot of stitches, right? So it was clearly quite a gash. She said the emergency room would have been able to handle any potential complications. And Dr. Moon said that stitching the woman up on Epstein's dining room table was, quote, "a choice made not in the patient's best interest, but in, it sounds to me, a friend's best interest. This is very difficult to justify," end quote. So she's pretty much saying that about Eva Dubin, right? You made this decision and you didn't follow protocol and you did something that you knew you shouldn't have ethically as a doctor to help and facilitate a friend. And now we have Dr. Ting, he's going to become implicated in all sorts of things, because he and Epstein became friendly as well. And he later received a $50,000 donation from Epstein for his breast cancer research. And he and his girlfriend, along with her children, were guests at Epstein's island. Now, Dr. Ting was also a guest of Epstein's often, whether he was consulting with one of Epstein's female friends about a nose job or removing a cyst from Epstein's shoulder at Epstein's home. In an email that Dr. Ting sent to Leslie Groff, Epstein's assistant, he says he's running late because he's on his way to perform surgery on Epstein at Epstein's house. And he also said in this email, quote, "Also, the department chairman found out I was planning to do the excision today at the patient's home because my assistant was gathering the equipment and said if I did it there, I would be sanctioned. Ridiculous," end quote. So Dr. Ting is taking his assistant from Mount Sinai. He's taking medical supplies and equipment from Mount Sinai to go to Jeffrey Epstein's house and perform a medical procedure. And his boss is like, "Hey, if you do this, you're going to be sanctioned. It's not right." And he's like, "I'm doing it anyway. Ridiculous. We're not going to tell him, but I'm doing it anyways. It's ridiculous. He has a problem with this." Now, of course, Dr. Ting has given a statement, the same statement we have heard from so many, that he knew nothing, he never witnessed any illegal activities, and, quote, "Mr. Epstein represents the very worst of human nature, and I deeply regret having had any association with him," end quote. I think these people are all using the same, media management or PR firm because their statements after it's found out how deep they were in with Jeffrey Epstein, they're so much the same. So it's interesting because the Department of Justice initially had a photo of this whole stitches on the dining room table incident, and it was up on the DOJ website. The faces of the people in the picture were all blacked out. And Dr. Ting initially told the New York Times that he was not in that picture. Okay, he was not there. He did not do that. He said, "That was not me in the picture." And he said that when all the faces were redacted. But then the DOJ posted that same picture with one face not redacted anymore. And that is the face of Dr. Ting. And Dr. Ting has now declined to comment on the new version of the photo that shows he absolutely was there. And also the emails which show he absolutely was there. Now, we have more to talk about as far as Eva Dubin, Mount Sinai. We just can't get into it right now, but we will. I will simply tell you right now that Eva was doing a lot of things for Jeffrey Epstein. She gave him unprecedented access to Mount Sinai. And she was also communicating with Epstein in July of 2014 about Karina's mother traveling from Belarus to the United States for some breast cancer treatment. And basically what happened is Epstein wrote a letter. And it was a letter that he had written for Eva. And the letter said that Eva had consulted with doctors about Karina's mother, making Karina's mother a patient of Dr. Eva Dubin's, which she wasn't. And Eva wrote back, quote, "This makes me nervous," end quote, to which Epstein responded, quote, "Make any changes you like. It's just for her visa. She needs to show that there's a doctor," end quote. So Epstein's lying about medical treatment of a patient, and Eva Dubin, who's a doctor, a very highly respected doctor, is going along with it. And I don't know if she went along with it or not, but Eva wrote back that Epstein should call her at home, probably not wanting any more of this specific transaction to be in writing. But, it did end up that Karina's mother came to the United States for breast cancer treatment, so somehow that was facilitated and happened. And the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Eva Dubin was far from business only. Eva seemed to use members of Epstein's staff constantly, so she was always using his drivers to transport herself and her children around. She used his New York apartments to have guests of hers stay in. And one of Eva's daughters, Selena, was in communication with Epstein, who she called Uncle Jeffrey. This was the person, the child of Eva's that Epstein was apparently the godfather of. And we need to talk about Selena and Jeffrey Epstein, because remember, I said Jeffrey Epstein would tell everyone he wasn't into marriage, he wouldn't do this, he wouldn't do that, but he was also constantly on the lookout for a wife. And he told a friend once that Selena Dubin was the only person he would consider marrying. And this was at a time when she was at an age that it wasn't appropriate for him to be saying that about her, besides the fact that he's her godfather, besides the fact that he's known her his entire life. He's pulling a Woody Allen here. But anyways, there are things to talk about when it comes to Selena and Jeffrey Epstein. And also remembering that Eva Dubin told the parole board that she would 100% feel comfortable having Epstein around her children. So we are now in July of 2011, and at this time, Karina Shuliak is talking about how she has to meet with her lawyer. She's dealing with immigration issues. At the end of June, Jeffrey Epstein told her about plans to fly to Aspen either July 8th or 9th, and Karina said she would try to take time off from work. Epstein replies, quote, "Good luck on your submission for immigration. I hope you can come next week. What would be perfect, I think, for you would be to take Saturday and Monday off. I will make up your lost wages. You will be able to see more, though, if you can only come for 2 days. That is better than nothing," end quote. By August 30th, Karina told Epstein that she was going to go to the immigration judge and she could apply for work in December. By September, I think that Karina had started to engage in opening herself up to intimate activities with Epstein and other girls, or at least she is more aware and accepting that Epstein is being intimate with other women, including her friend Katya. On September 9th, Epstein asked Karina if she and Katya were around that weekend. She replied yes, they were, and she asked when he would be back because he was out of town at this point and he was coming back in. And on September 10th, Epstein confirms if Katya would be able to come the next day at 9 a.m., and Karina says yes. But then on September 11th, early in the morning before 9 a.m., Karina emailed Epstein and said that Katya could not come because she was sick. And when Epstein asked if Karina could come instead, she said yes. So the next day, Karina emailed Epstein and said, quote, "Just want to say thank you one more time for this evening. It was so interesting. And of course, for your talk with the dean. You know how much it means for me. Thank you so much for this, Jeffrey," end quote. She's talking about the dean of Columbia's dental school because he is getting her into the school, even though she technically wouldn't have been eligible at that time. So on September 12th, Karina asked Jeffrey Epstein to find out about the immigration stuff in New Jersey. When he had the chance, he replied back saying, yes, Jersey's quicker. So he's helping her with school and he's helping her with immigration. On September 18th, Epstein emailed Karina and told her to come at 5 instead because he wanted her to be rested. But it seems this meeting that night did not go well because later that night at 10:44 p.m., Epstein wrote Karina an email that said, quote, "I'm sorry that you have chosen to be closed. I wish you luck," end quote. So who knows what went on between Epstein and Karina on the evening of the 18th again, but I have my theories about what he meant when he told her he was sorry she had chosen to be closed. Usually in a romantic relationship between two people, if one person says they're closed to something, it typically means they aren't willing to explore something sexually or they're not willing to keep their relationship open, as in open to seeing other people. And we know Epstein was seeing many other people. September was actually a super busy month for him. On September 16th, he emailed Irina and asked her if she was available the following night. She replied back and said, quote, "Big Katya and Victoria can do Sunday. Waiting to hear from Olga and Sasha. I am free anytime after 6:30 p.m., end quote. Just a few days before that, Epstein had emailed Irina and asked her, Olga tonight, Big Katya tomorrow morning? And on September 18th, Epstein emailed someone else and asked, can Victoria do 10 this morning? And the person replied, quote, also Olga can do around 10, end quote. And Epstein wrote back, Big Katya at 10:30. And the other person wrote back that all of this was confirmed. And then don't forget, later that night on the 18th, Karina was with Epstein, and he wanted her to come at 5, so she was rested. But maybe he really wanted her to come at 5 because his old man ass is the one that needed the rest and another pill so that he could make all of this happen on the same day. He was a very busy man when it came to scheduling back-to-back appointments for massages and the like, and sometimes he would have 2 women in one time slot. So on September 22nd, Jeffrey Epstein emailed Karina and said he hoped she had gotten the book he gave Katya for her, and he's sure that Katya explained his position to Karina. Karina wrote back, quote, yes, thank you very much for the book. Katya told me about your position, which is completely understandable to me. I think we need to talk, end quote. So was the position that Katya had to explain to Karina the fact that one woman was not enough for Mr. Jeffrey Epstein, and all the perks and benefits that Karina was receiving should be enough for her to be okay with that? From the help getting into dental school at Columbia to the help he would give her with immigration, the help he was giving her parents in Belarus, along with all the money he was giving them all because he was sending Karina tons of wire transfers for tons of money. He was sending her parents wire transfers for money. And on top of that, all of the trips he was going to bring Karina on, and she would go to the island several times. He would fly her to his place in Palm Beach and his New Mexico ranch. He was paying for her doctors, her medicines. He would eventually put her up in one of his apartments in New York City, rent-free, of course, as he did with many of the women he kept in his orbit. But Karina does not seem happy with this arrangement. She seems closed off to it, if you will. So when Karina said she needed to talk to him, Epstein responded that he was available on his cellar at home. And Karina replied back and she said, I mean, we need to talk in person. And Epstein wrote, quote, I am leaving the country tonight. I am free from 2 to 3:30 today. Then I will be back in 3 weeks. End quote. So according to his other emails, Epstein was going to be in Paris during that time where he was making plans to meet with other women, some that he had already known, some that other women were arranging for him to make plans with while he was in Paris. And it's really stunning to me because I think some men would look at this and be like, man, this guy's got the life, right? He's in New York City. He's got as many girls as he wants whenever he wants them at his beck and call. He goes to a different country, and before he even lands, he's got plans to meet with women there. But it's so sad and pathetic to me because you know that none of these women actually liked this guy or wanted to have sex with him. They were tolerating what they had to do with him in order to receive the benefits that they would receive from him. And, you know, these were usually gifts, money. Obviously, he would pay them. But he would also say, oh, hey, do you want anything from New York? I'm on my way to Paris. And they'd say, yeah, give me a fancy designer handbag or a pair of heels that cost $4,000. It was all the perks that came along with him. They didn't want anything to do with him. And honestly, I don't think that he cared that they didn't actually like him. I think that maybe made it better for him. But it seems like Karina actually liked him and would eventually be in love with him, which I can't understand, but we'll talk about that. So Karina wrote that she was at work, so she could not see him before he left to go to Paris, and she would just talk to him when he got back. Epstein wrote back, quote, I respect your decisions, and your decisions have consequences. No cookie, no thoughtfulness. Many times you ask what you can do, and in the end, it's always the same. 0, end quote. Well, that's mean. He's going to the devaluing part of the manipulation now, and Karina said, listen, whatever, I still want to talk in person, and I'll wait for you to get back. It's better that way. And Epstein emailed, quote, as I said, I have a great respect for you, and of course I will talk to you. If you prefer to wait until I return, that is okay, but we can either Skype or talk on the phone so that you have answers sooner, end quote. So it's not really a secret at this point that Jeffrey Epstein was obsessed with having a harem, a group of women around him who were at his beck and call for his every sexual need. We know this because he's talked to a lot of people about it. So, for instance, I think it was September of 2013, billionaire Richard Branson emailed Epstein, quote, it was really nice seeing you yesterday. The boys in water sports can't stop talking about it. Anytime you're in the area, would love to see you, as long as you bring your harem, end quote. This was followed up by Branson giving Epstein some PR advice, once again for his reputation that was ruined by Epstein being a convicted sex offender. And Branson said, quote, I think if Bill Gates was willing to say that you've been a brilliant advisor to him, that you slipped up many years ago by sleeping with a 17-year-old woman and were punished for it, that you've more than learned your lesson and have done nothing against the law since. And yes, as a single man, you seem to have a penchant for women, but there's nothing wrong with that. Something along those lines, end quote. In June of 2011, Epstein was emailing with a woman, and her name is Marina Berazuk. Apparently, he'd known Marina for about a year, maybe a little more, and he'd also helped her in multiple ways. They clearly had some sort of sexual relationship. He tells her that he's in Istanbul, and he hoped to visit the harem the following day. He said he was trying to build the 4 levels of Topkapi ideas. He said initiates, favorites, beliefs, principled. Now, it looks like he's referring to the harem at Topkapi Palace, the historic imperial women's quarters inside the former Ottoman palace in Istanbul. The harem wasn't necessarily what Western ideas of a harem would be. It was actually an entire internal society where, like, all the women in the Sultan's kind of purview would reside. And that included the Sultan's mother, yes, his official wives, his consorts, his concubines, slaves, also the eunuchs who were put there to protect the women. We aren't really sure of exact numbers, but At any given time, there could be hundreds of women in the harem. Estimates range from 200 to 400. Some estimates give, in the thousands. Now, Islamic law allowed up to 4 legal wives at a time. However, Ottoman sultans typically had few or no formal wives, and they relied primarily on concubines. And a sultan might have several favorite consorts over his lifetime. He would father children with multiple women. He would even elevate one to chief consort if he liked her a lot and she bore him a son. So Epstein speaks of levels to this Marina woman, and he's like initiates, favorites, beliefs, principles. This doesn't have anything to do with the actual structure of the Topkapi Palace. There was like a favorites level, which were the concubines that caught the Sultan's attention. There was also like a novice level, young girls in training. So it sounds like Epstein was inventing his own framework while also at the same time misapplying terminology for actual historical things. And that's interesting because it looks like he used initiates instead of novices, like people he's, bringing in, like girls he's having recruited into his harem, like a cult or a secret society, initiates, something like that, So Marina wrote back to him, quote, "There is also the Queen Mother. I am wondering if having 400 women at your disposal can bring the harmony and the wings that a deep relationship with one woman can do. By the way, what are the levels at Jeffrey's harem?" End quote. To her first question, Epstein replied, "You already know." You already know. And to her second question, which I assume was about the levels of his harem, Jeffrey Epstein replied, quote, "The harem meant protection for those inside from those outside. Mozart wrote the Seraglio. There's a main theme, recapitulated, echoed, enhanced by its variations, many movements, intrigue in the melodies, the harmony, and the wings can be heard. As you spend the summer eating experiences, try to be open, form your judgments only after they have been fully digested. I truly look forward to spending time with you." End quote. So what this weirdo is actually saying is, hey, historically, the imperial court in the Ottoman Empire was a protected inner domestic court inside palaces. So when he says meant protection, he's invoking the idea of an inner circle shielded from outsiders, a controlled environment, a system centered around a dominant theme, aka himself, and all these women under his purview who he has isolated from the outside world, and they are all protected from the outside world and the judgment. And then he tells Marina, hey, don't judge me. Like, really open yourself up to what this could mean. And she responds like, whatever, dude, I'm not judging you. I currently have a husband and a lover. I don't care what you do, basically. And this is a well-known concept that Jeffrey Epstein was trying to do. He was trying to build a harem. He's not just talking in like his convoluted philosophical way. He wanted to do that. In 2019, an assistant of Epstein's who told the FBI that she was assaulted by Epstein multiple times, she talked about his ambitions to build a harem on Epstein's island. She stated, quote, "He wanted it to be a castle-like structure, resembling the Alhambra in Spain. He wanted the structure to house multiple girls and would ask for ideas about the structure," end quote. She also said that Istanbul's Topkapi Palace was another one of Epstein's inspirations. Another one of Epstein's victims told the FBI that he had given her books in English and Arabic and explained to her what a harem was, and he told her, quote, "You'll be part of Babylon," end quote. Another victim said that Epstein told her he didn't believe in monogamy and his idea was to build a harem. And let's look at that word Epstein used again, Seraglio. He was referencing the abduction from the Seraglio, which is Mozart's opera about a woman held in a Turkish palace. Seraglio is another word for harem. This woman was being held in a harem, and her true love was trying to get her out. So Epstein wanted the women in his life to be part of his harem, to be in his inner circle, loyal to him, shielded from outsiders, and he needed them to understand their role in the hierarchy of his palace of depravity. So I guess Epstein was back in New York City by October 7th because he emailed Karina and asked if she'd been doing any thinking. He said he was round all weekend, and Karina wrote back, quote, "That was witty the way you wrote it, considering our last conversation about me doing nothing but thinking. Smiley face, yes, I have been doing a lot of thinking," end quote. At this point, I guess the two have talked. Okay, they probably Skyped or something while Epstein was in Paris having sex with other women. And Epstein has brought Karina around round to his way of thinking because he asked her what her schedule was, and at the same time, he was emailing people who worked for him and telling them to give Karina money, $500 here, $6,000 there. Karina emailed Epstein to tell him thanks for the money and that she was very grateful to him because he had helped her with a lot of things. But by the end of October, Karina is moving into a new apartment, not Epstein's apartment yet, and she's suddenly short on time. And Jeffrey Epstein does not like that. Karina is not being a good harem girl. Okay, she's not respecting the rules of the harem. So Epstein forwarded an email from Karina that was basically saying, I have to work and I'm moving and I'm really busy. And he forwarded it to someone else saying, quote, she doesn't get it, doesn't offer to make time, working at a job that has no future, although I gave her money not to have to work, end quote. So this person, who I believe was another one of his women, wrote back that she agreed with Epstein. Karina definitely didn't get it. And this person wrote, quote, what would you like me to do? Shall I call and meet her today? End quote. So he's enlisting other women to bring the harem girls, Karina, the harem girl, back in line, get her back online. Now, it wasn't Ghislaine Maxwell because her emails and her identity is not redacted in these emails, so I'm not sure who it was, but I will figure it out. On October 31st, Epstein emailed Karina and told her he was coming back to New York Wednesday night. He said his beard was returning with him, and Karina replied, quote, ah ha ha, and you'll start to do all those terrible things to women again, smiley face, end quote. As far as the beard comment, it could be a nod to Epstein growing a beard while he was serving his pretend pseudo jail time in 2009. I did look it up, and people who saw him during that time said that he did grow his facial hair out. But either way, Karina is clearly going along with Epstein's narrative that he didn't do anything wrong, that his lifestyle is perfectly acceptable, and she's making fun of the terrible things he did to women and young girls in the past. And this is when I think she kind of loses me as far as, is she a victim or was she an accomplice? Is she a victim or did she help Epstein do these things? And as we go further along the timeline, because we're still so early on, you'll see that it appears she helped Epstein in every aspect of his life. Now, we have to talk about so many other things that are happening around this time, but this video is going to be so long already, so I'm going to skip ahead in time and we'll come back to all of that in the next video. So at some point around the end of 2011, it looked like Epstein began calling Karina his girlfriend, and they were getting far more entrenched in each other's lives. Well, she was becoming entrenched in his life. She was his girlfriend, but she also seemed to start working for him in a way. Karina flew out to Epstein's island November 26th to the 30th. At the end of December, Leslie emailed Epstein and told him that David and Ann Gergen wanted to get together. And she said, quote, I assume you want them to come see you on the island, end quote. Epstein replied that Leslie should confirm it, and he asked her to have Karina do some research on David Gergen because she would also be on the island on December 25th when the Gergens were there. Now, who was David Gergen? And I say was because he passed away in July of 2025. David Gergen was huge in the political world, a longtime presidential advisor who served during the administrations of Nixon, Ford, Reagan, and Clinton. He later served as a political analyst for CNN. He was part of the Harvard faculty in 1999, and his wife, Ann, worked as a family therapist. Now, it looks like David Gergen and Epstein first crossed paths in 2004 or 2005 when Epstein approached Gergen about making a donation to Harvard's Kennedy School. Now, in an interview, Gergen said that Harvard had to do their due diligence on Epstein, as they did with every donor. And although there were some questions about his past, the university saw no reason to not accept this potential gift, this donation from Epstein. Gergen said, quote, somewhere along the way, serious questions began to arise about his past. And at that point, we slowed the conversation way down and became very wary of making sure it was the right thing to do or not. And eventually, both he and we, the conversation waned and eventually ended several years ago, end quote. I suppose that's why David and his wife were visiting Epstein's island in 2011, years after he was actually charged with crimes. And the year after, they were invited back, and David wanted to know if he could bring his brother and his brother's wife with him. David saw Epstein in April of that year as well and brought along his very talented research assistant, Michael Zuckerman. In January of 2013, David Gergen asked to meet with Epstein after arriving home from Davos. Gergen saw Epstein in 2014. He asked for his cell phone number. In 2015, in that same year, he was included in a list of Epstein's personal friends that Leslie and Karina put together to help out with a special gift for Epstein's birthday. So here was the gift. They were hoping that each person could write a short, one-page essay on sharing a meal in Jeffrey's dining room with Jeffrey and his wacky friends. And so they wanted to create a booklet of all these one-page essays from his closest friends, Epstein's closest friends, and then present it to Epstein for his birthday. Now, it seems that contact between David Gergen and Epstein did cease after this, at least in email. But then I found something interesting. I found it interesting that in 2018, Epstein sent an email titled "He Forgets." So the subject line of the email was "He Forgets." And the person that he sent it to is also interesting. But the email said, subject, "He Forgets." And in the email is a list of members of the Trilateral Commission. And David Gergen's name was in there as a member of the advisory board. So David Gergen was a part of this Trilateral Commission, and Jeffrey Epstein was also a member of the Trilateral Commission. The earliest year I could find that Epstein was active was 1998. Now, I don't want to get too deep into the conspiracy world, but this is Jeffrey Epstein. And I've been very careful so far, but we're going to go there because apparently the Trilateral Commission has been on the conspiracy theories list for quite some time, far before Jeffrey Epstein's involvement in the commission was ever publicly known. So I found a 1992 article in the Washington Post titled "Beware the Trilateral Commission." In the Washington Post, they're making fun of the conspiracy theory, but we do get some good information here, and we can see what was being said. And the article states, quote, "Behind closed doors, of course, they are meeting this weekend in Lisbon. Some call them the shadow government, the establishment, the global elite that runs the world. They call themselves simply the Trilateral Commission. Depending on which conspiracy theory you subscribe to, and the Trilateral Commission has found its way into many, this 19-year-old organization is anti-American, anti-democratic, anti-Christian, or anti-worker, and it's scheming to ultimately abolish the sovereignty of nations and establish a one-world government. According to Lyndon LaRouche, a fringe political candidate and convicted tax cheat, the Trilateral Commission is behind the international drug trade. A writer affiliated with the far-right Liberty Lobby says the commission is forever plotting to raise taxes on Americans, siphoning the money overseas. Evangelist Pat Robertson believes it is somehow linked to Freemasonry and the occult, that it springs from the depth of something that is evil. Preposterous, say members of the Trilateral Commission. It is merely a discussion group on world affairs composed of high-level corporate and public policy types from North America, Western Europe, and Japan. The commission seeks only to promote international cooperation for the betterment of everybody. Nothing sinister." End quote. Okay, so this was a 1992 article in the Washington Post, so obviously this has been going on for some time. And according to the internet, the Trilateral Commission is a non-governmental international organization aimed at closer cooperation between Japan, Western Europe, and North America. It was founded in 1973, primarily by David Rockefeller, to foster closer cooperation during a time of economic crisis. There was an oil crisis happening. Now, Jimmy Carter was once a member, and he was basically virtually unknown before that, and then he became president, and then he made several more members of the Trilateral Commission. He gave them positions on his cabinet, basically, so anxiety intensified, and then critics said it was proof that the commission was infiltrating the government. Now, officially, the commission, the Trilateral Commission, it's not a governing body and has no governing authority. Like, they can't do anything. They just talk about issues. But people argue that the members were among the elite and powerful, which gave the commission power, whether or not we want to believe it or accept it. Now, here's where things get interesting. In September of 2018, Epstein emailed Borge Brende, who had been the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Norway until 2017, and who acted as the president and CEO of the World Economic Forum from 2017 until 2026. Now, he had to resign in 2026, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So anyways, Epstein is emailing with Borge, and he says, quote, "Davos can really replace the UN. Cyber, crypt, genetics, international coordination. Like my stint at the Trilateral, issues now need to deal with distributed trust and internet fallout," end quote. So once again, for those who don't know, the World Economic Forum is not a government body. It is a convening platform of business leaders, heads of state, and academics. And so when Epstein says that Davos, which is the World Economic Forum annual meeting held every January, when he's saying that can replace the UN, he means that global governance no longer needs formal treaty-based institutions, and that informal elite coordination like Davos would be more efficient. So if you strip away the mystery of all that, Epstein is saying that the World Economic Forum model is better suited than the UN to govern emerging world issues. And Borge agrees, replying, quote, "Exactly. We need a new global architecture. World Economic Forum, Davos, is uniquely positioned, public-private," end quote. So when you talk about a group of the elite who have not been voted in by the people, trying to run the world and make decisions that affect the people, this kind of sounds like exactly what's going on, right? Now, the World Economic Forum has described its mission as improving the state of the world through public-private cooperation. They publish reports that can influence policy conversation, and once again, critics argue that it's nothing big. It's just a gathering of the elites of the world together in closed-door meetings. And once again, people say, people who are involved with the World Economic Forum, they're like, this is nothing big. It's just a gathering of the world's elites together in closed-door meetings. And they talk about huge issues that impact all of us. Now, critics have argued, hey, maybe a gathering of elites from around the world may have a disproportionate influence on things that are happening in the world. Like business executives may have more sway in shaping global discussions and priorities than our elected officials or the general public. And yes, the World Economic Forum is pretty open about things. They have sessions that are streamed and they publish reports and they talk about stuff all the time. But it is true that many private discussions occur behind closed doors, and that rightly fuels speculation and claims of some shadow government. Many presidents are members. Emmanuel Macron of France, Javier Milei of Argentina, Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine, Donald Trump of the United States, Isaac Herzog of Israel. Members also include the CEO of Microsoft, CEO of Amazon, CEO of JP Morgan, CEO of Uber, Bill Gates. The list goes on and on. When I say members, I mean people that are taking part in this. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, all these people, they go. And the founder, Klaus Schwab, is a billionaire businessman whose father once made weapons for the Nazis during wartime. And on the board of trustees sits really notable figures like the CEO of BlackRock, the president of the World Bank Group, a vice chairman of BlackRock, the president of the European Central Bank. The list goes on and on. The World Economic Forum convenes heads of state, central bank leaders, CEOs of multinational companies, tech platform executives, NGO leadership, media figures. And if individuals across all of these sectors shared coordinated intent, their combined influence could technically leverage everything, right? Financial systems, information flows, supply chains, technology standards, regulatory frameworks. Essentially, democracy relies on a separation of powers, and when economic, technological, informational, and political influence overlap within that same elite network of people, critics argue that separation becomes blurred. In political science, agenda setting is often more powerful than voting. So if a small network of individuals can shape which problems are urgent, which solutions are reasonable, which policies are framed as inevitable, they influence the boundaries of debate, because democracy depends not only on voting, but on open competition of ideas. So if discourse narrows before the public sees it, then our democratic choices become constrained, and that is a theoretical risk in any elite convening structure. Additionally, many World Economic Forum participants lead major technology and media companies: Apple, Amazon, Adobe, Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, Verizon, Meta, CNBC, the New York Times, Bloomberg, Condé Nast, which means potential influence over social media. I don't know if you know, but Condé Nast, I believe, still owns Reddit. So influence over social media, influence over cloud infrastructure, digital identity systems, financial transaction systems. What do I mean by that? Well, look how we pay for things now. PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay. PayPal is part of the World Economic Forum. PayPal owns Venmo, and we know that Apple's part of the World Economic Forum. At least we have Cash App for now. Technology and the business of technology, the exchange and control of information, is actually very important when it comes down to all of this. Jeffrey Epstein is talking very often to the president of the World Economic Forum. They're talking about things all the time. And Jeffrey Epstein would, go to Davos, and he would be in communications about what was happening there. And he would talk to people and meet with people who were involved. There's a lot of overlap here. Jeffrey Epstein, the elites of the world who control everything down to what we're even allowed to see on the internet or talk about on the internet. That's a concern, and it's a very legitimate concern considering what else is in the Epstein files when it comes to AI, when it comes to the control and flow of information and how important that is to controlling the general public. The things that Jeffrey Epstein was interested in and the things that the people who he was friends with also seemed to be interested in. And then when you talk about the people of the world who are elite, rich, and in charge of everything, right? And they all get together and they have conversations that we, the general public, don't know about. And they're saying, we're not a governing body. We don't make any laws. But do you? Do you? So this is a big deal. These are things that are happening that shouldn't be. And we're going to talk about how Boris Brend had to step down as president once his communications and relationship with Epstein became pretty public. We're going to talk about how Klaus Schwab last year was forced to step down, even though he definitely didn't want to, because of the things he was doing that don't really honor what apparently the World Economic Forum was set up to be. And we're going to discuss why this is all an issue. I mean, wait until we scratch the surface of Aaron Swartz, who was one of the founders of Reddit, who was somebody that was considered a hacktivist, who was trying to expose things, and he took his own life in 2013. And there do seem to be significant connections between Aaron Swartz and people in Epstein's web of influence in the world of government and education, MIT specifically. It seems like a lot more is connected than we thought before, but they're just hoping you don't notice the connections. They released 3.5 million pages of Epstein files, and they hope, well, who has the attention span to go through all that? And of course, there are people out there who do have that attention span and who have been knowing that there's connections for a long time, and they're just waiting for things like this to release so that they can prove it. And that's what we're doing here, hopefully. So yeah, literally as I was writing this script, it was announced that Boris Brend had resigned from the World Economic Forum because of his connections to Epstein. We are not done talking about him yet, or Epstein's connections to and in Norway. We aren't done talking about the World Economic Forum either, because Boris Brend stepping down hasn't been their only issue or scandal. And we still have to continue on with Karina Shuliak's story, which, if you couldn't tell, I have used as a framework to introduce so many others and to start building out a who's who in the life of Jeffrey Epstein that we will return to time and time again. We still have to talk about Peggy Siegel, entertainment publicist extraordinaire with a Rolodex so big and so impressive you'd think she would have better things to do than help someone like Jeffrey Epstein rebuild his reputation and re-enter polite society after he served time for sex crimes with a minor. Peggy is one of the more reprehensible figures we'll talk about, in my personal and humble opinion. We have to talk about Nadia, a social media influencer and Epstein's personal pilot, among other things. We have to go deeper. We have to start putting together the connections and delve into parts of the files that get much, much darker. So I'm sorry. I know this video was very long, but I'm glad you stayed with me till the end. If you did, don't forget to like this video if you liked it. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. Subscribe if you haven't already, because there will be more Epstein videos to come. I will sprinkle in our traditional true crime videos amongst that, but please let me know what you think about this in the comments. Do you like it? Are you interested? Are you not interested? We should all be interested, but please let me know what you think, and I'll make sure that there's enough content for everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and until next time, stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe, and I'll see you very, very soon. Bye.
Straight down.